The mahogany casket gleamed under the funeral home's fluorescent lights as Marcus Whitmore adjusted the floral arrangements one final time. He moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had organized countless social events. His designer black suit perfectly coordinated with his understated accessories. To the gathered mourners, he appeared to be the picture of devoted grief, a loving son-in-law honoring his late mother-in-law's memory, with an elegant celebration of life. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. What none of them knew was that Helena Whitmore was very much alive, sitting in a rented sedan across the street, watching through tinted windows as her daughter's husband orchestrated what he believed would be his ticket to financial freedom. Helena Whitmore had perfected the art of being overlooked long before her supposed death. At 70, she moved through the world with the quiet presence of someone who had learned that observation often yielded more valuable information than participation. Her weathered hands, scarred from decades of managing construction sites, now gripped a lukewarm cup of coffee as she watched the morning routine unfold at Riverside General Hospital from her corner table in the cafeteria. The hospital's beige walls and institutional lighting created an atmosphere of sterile anonymity, where Helena had spent the past 6 months recovering from what everyone believed had been a fatal heart attack. Dr. Patricia Chen had explained the rare medical phenomenon that had saved her life. A condition called Lazarus syndrome, where patients spontaneously regain circulation after being declared clinically dead. Helena's case had been so unusual that the medical team had agreed to keep her recovery confidential while they documented her remarkable return to life. But Helena had requested the secrecy for reasons that had nothing to do with medical research. Helena's journey to becoming one of the region's most successful construction entrepreneurs had begun 43 years earlier when she was 27 years old, recently divorced, and desperate to provide for her 3-year-old daughter Diana. Her ex-husband had disappeared, leaving behind only debt and broken promises, forcing Helena to discover strength she never knew she possessed. She had started by taking odd jobs around construction sites, initially just cleaning offices and organizing paperwork for small contractors who paid cash, and asked a few questions. Helena's attention to detail and natural organizational skills had quickly caught the attention of project managers who needed someone reliable to coordinate material deliveries and maintain job site schedules. Within 2 years, Helena had learned enough about construction logistics to recognize inefficiencies that were costing contractors thousands of dollars per project. She began offering consulting services, helping small construction companies streamline their operations while building relationships with suppliers who appreciated working with someone who understood both quality requirements and budget constraints. Her breakthrough had come when she proposed a solution to a major scheduling crisis that threatened to bankrupt Henderson Construction, a mid-sized firm that had overcommitted to multiple simultaneous projects. Helena's innovative approach to resource allocation and subcontractor coordination had saved the company nearly $250,000, earning her a reputation as someone who could solve problems that defeated more experienced professionals. Helena had used the consulting fees from that success to purchase her first pickup truck and establish Whitmore Construction as an independent entity. Her initial business model focused on small residential projects that larger companies considered too minor to pursue profitably, but which provided steady income and valuable experience in managing every aspect of construction operations. The early years had been brutally challenging. Helena worked 16-hour days, managing job sites during daylight hours and handling paperwork, billing, and planning during evenings while Diana slept. She had learned every trade skill necessary to complete projects independently, from electrical work to plumbing, roofing to foundation repair, developing expertise that allowed her to eliminate subcontractor costs while maintaining quality standards that exceeded client expectations. Diana had grown up surrounded by construction sites, spending afternoons and weekends watching her mother negotiate with suppliers, coordinate with municipal inspectors, and manage crews of workers who initially questioned taking direction from a woman, but gradually developed respect for Helena's competence and fairness. The little girl had learned arithmetic by calculating material quantities and developed problem-solving skills by helping Helena troubleshoot construction challenges. Helena's business philosophy had been shaped by her understanding that construction success required 3 essential elements: meticulous planning, reliable execution, and absolute integrity in dealing with clients and workers. She had built her reputation by consistently delivering projects on time and under budget, while maintaining quality standards that generated referral business from satisfied customers. By the time Diana entered elementary school, Whitmore Construction had grown to employ 12 full-time workers and maintain ongoing contracts with several local developers who appreciated Helena's ability to manage complex projects without the complications that often arose with larger construction firms. Helena had reinvested every available dollar into equipment purchases and business expansion, gradually building the financial foundation that would support decades of continued growth. The expansion into commercial construction had begun when Diana was 10 years old. Helena had bid on a small office building project that most contractors avoided because of its complicated site constraints and aggressive timeline requirements. Her innovative approach to foundation design and construction sequencing had not only delivered the project successfully, but had demonstrated capabilities that attracted attention from major developers. Helena's transition into large-scale commercial projects had required significant investment in heavy equipment, bonding capacity, and specialized personnel. But the increased project values had generated profits that allowed rapid business expansion while providing Diana with educational opportunities Helena had never imagined possible. Throughout Diana's teenage years, Helena had balanced the demands of growing her business with the responsibilities of single parenthood, often bringing her daughter to construction sites, where Diana developed an understanding of project management, worker relations, and client service that would serve her well in later professional endeavors. Helena had intentionally involved Diana in business discussions, teaching her to evaluate financial statements, understand contract negotiations, and recognize the warning signs of potential problems with clients, suppliers, or employees. These lessons had been presented as family activities rather than formal education, but they had provided Diana with business acumen that exceeded most college graduates. When Diana expressed interest in pursuing journalism rather than construction management, Helena had fully supported her daughter's career choice, while ensuring that Diana understood the business principles that would apply regardless of her chosen profession. Helena's success had provided Diana with educational opportunities, including private schools, summer programs abroad, and eventually a prestigious university education that Helena could never have afforded during her own youth. Diana had graduated from Northwestern University with degrees in journalism and communications, eventually building a successful career as an investigative reporter for the Chicago Tribune. Her work had won several regional awards and had established her reputation as someone who could uncover complex stories while maintaining the ethical standards that Helena had instilled through years of business integrity demonstrations. Helena had been enormously proud of Diana's professional achievements, particularly her daughter's ability to maintain independence and financial security without relying on family wealth. Diana had purchased her own home, built her own career, and developed her own social relationships, while maintaining close family ties that brought Helena genuine happiness. The introduction of Marcus Harrison into Diana's life had initially seemed like a positive development. Diana, at 41, had been focused primarily on her career, and had expressed concerns about whether she would ever find someone who could appreciate her professional ambitions while sharing her values about integrity and personal responsibility. Marcus had appeared to offer exactly what Diana was seeking. He was articulate, well-educated, and professionally successful as a financial consultant specializing in estate planning and investment management. His work required sophisticated understanding of complex financial instruments and tax implications, suggesting intellectual capabilities that would complement Diana's journalistic skills. Helena had first met Marcus during a family dinner that Diana had organized to introduce her new romantic interest to her mother. Marcus had been charming and attentive, asking thoughtful questions about Helena's business experiences while expressing admiration for her success in an industry traditionally dominated by men. His questions about construction industry challenges and opportunities had seemed genuine, and his apparent interest in Helena's business philosophy had created positive initial impressions. Marcus had asked about specific projects, construction methodologies, and business development strategies with enough sophistication to suggest real understanding of complex business operations. During subsequent family gatherings, Marcus had continued demonstrating what appeared to be sincere interest in Helena's professional achievements while building rapport with Diana through shared interests in travel, fine dining, and cultural activities that Helena's demanding work schedule had never allowed her to fully appreciate. Helena had observed Marcus's interactions with Diana carefully, noting his apparent attentiveness to her daughter's professional commitments and his willingness to accommodate Diana's frequently changing schedule due to investigative assignments that could require sudden travel or extended research periods. Marcus had seemed genuinely supportive of Diana's career ambitions, encouraging her to pursue challenging assignments while offering to manage social and domestic responsibilities that might otherwise create conflicts with her professional obligations. His financial consulting work allowed flexible scheduling that complemented Diana's unpredictable journalism deadlines. The engagement had occurred after Marcus and Diana had been dating for 14 months. Marcus had proposed during a vacation to Italy that he had planned meticulously, incorporating Diana's interests in Renaissance art and architecture, while creating romantic circumstances that reflected his understanding of her personality and preferences. Helena had been invited to participate in wedding planning discussions, where Marcus had demonstrated what appeared to be genuine consideration for both Diana's preferences and Helena's financial contributions to the celebration. His suggestions had been thoughtful and cost-conscious, avoiding the extravagant expenditures that might have suggested inappropriate interest in family wealth. The wedding ceremony had been elegant but not ostentatious, incorporating traditions that honored both families while reflecting Diana and Marcus's shared values about beginning their marriage with celebration rather than financial stress. Helena had contributed significantly to wedding expenses, but had appreciated Marcus's apparent reluctance to accept excessive generosity. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now back to where we left off. During the early months of Diana and Marcus's marriage, Helena had continued observing their relationship dynamics while maintaining appropriate boundaries that allowed the young couple to establish their own household routines and social relationships without interference from well-meaning family members. Marcus had appeared to be adapting well to marriage with someone whose career required irregular schedules and frequent travel. He had taken responsibility for household management tasks while maintaining his own professional commitments, creating domestic stability that supported Diana's continued career development. Helena had been particularly impressed by Marcus's apparent understanding of Diana's professional independence and his willingness to manage social commitments when Diana's assignments required last-minute schedule changes. His financial consulting practice seemed to provide sufficient income to support their lifestyle without requiring Diana to modify her career priorities. The first subtle warning signs had appeared approximately 6 months after the wedding, when Helena noticed that Marcus's questions about her business operations had become more frequent and more detailed. His inquiries had evolved from general interest in construction industry challenges to specific requests for information about Whitmore Construction's financial performance, client relationships, and future expansion plans. Initially, Helena had attributed Marcus's increased curiosity to natural development of family relationships and his professional background in financial planning, which would logically create interest in understanding Helena's business operations for potential estate planning purposes. However, Helena's decades of experience evaluating people's motivations in business contexts had gradually made her aware that Marcus's questions were becoming systematically focused on information that would be valuable for someone assessing acquisition opportunities, rather than someone simply interested in family business understanding. Marcus had begun asking about Helena's succession planning, inquiring whether she had developed strategies for eventually transferring business ownership to Diana, or whether she might consider selling Whitmore Construction to external buyers who could provide Diana with liquid assets rather than ongoing operational responsibilities. These conversations had been presented as concerns about Diana's ability to balance journalism career demands with potential future business management obligations, but Helena had recognized that the questions revealed assumptions about Diana's capabilities and preferences that Marcus had never discussed directly with his wife. Helena had started paying closer attention to Marcus's behavior during family gatherings, noting subtle patterns in his interactions that suggested growing interest in financial topics while decreasing engagement with discussions about Diana's professional achievements or personal interests unrelated to potential inheritance. Marcus had also begun expressing concerns about Helena's health and the stress associated with managing a demanding construction business at her age, suggestions that seemed caring but which consistently led to discussions about business succession planning and asset management strategies. Helena's construction industry experience had taught her to recognize when someone was conducting informal due diligence investigations disguised as casual conversation, and Marcus's behavioral patterns had begun triggering the same instincts that had protected her from predatory business partners throughout her career. The realization that Marcus might be more interested in Helena's wealth than in Diana's happiness had created a dilemma that challenged Helena's desire to trust her daughter's judgment while protecting the family assets that represented 4 decades of dedicated work and sacrifice. Helena had decided to begin her own informal investigation of Marcus's background and motivations, using the same systematic approach that had served her well in evaluating potential business partners and major clients throughout her construction career. Her research had revealed information about Marcus's previous marriage and divorce that raised additional concerns about his approach to relationships with financially successful women. Court records had shown that his first marriage had ended with his ex-wife liquidating significant business assets to satisfy divorce settlement requirements. Helena had also discovered that Marcus's financial consulting practice was less successful than he had represented, with client lists and revenue streams that were insufficient to support the lifestyle he maintained with Diana. His apparent financial security seemed to depend heavily on expectations about Diana's eventual inheritance rather than his own professional achievements. These discoveries had convinced Helena that Marcus's interest in their family was motivated primarily by financial opportunity rather than genuine affection for Diana, creating an impossible situation where protecting her daughter might require exposing painful truths about the man Diana believed she loved. Helena had been contemplating how to address her concerns about Marcus when the heart attack had struck, creating circumstances that would reveal Marcus's true character while providing Helena with the opportunity to observe his behavior when he believed she could no longer protect her daughter from his predatory intentions. The morning of September 15th began like any other for Helena Whitmore. She arrived at the Riverside Heights construction site at 6:30 a.m., her steel-toed boots crunching across the gravel as she surveyed the progress on what would become the city's newest medical complex. The crisp autumn air carried the familiar sense of concrete dust and diesel fuel that had been the backdrop of her professional life for over 4 decades. Helena's daily routine involved walking every square foot of her active projects, checking structural progress, material deliveries, and worker safety protocols with the meticulous attention that had built her reputation for delivering flawless results. The Riverside Heights project represented her largest contract to date, NIA's $12 million medical facility that would cement Whitmore Construction's position among the region's premier commercial builders. She paused beside the foundation framework, running her experienced eye along the rebar placement and concrete forms that would support the building's critical load-bearing elements. The mathematical precision required for structural engineering had always appealed to Helena's analytical mind, providing the satisfaction of creating something permanent and meaningful that would serve the community for generations. Her project manager, Tommy Castellanos, approached with the morning reports and delivery schedules that required Helena's approval before work could begin. Tommy had worked for Whitmore Construction for 15 years, starting as a general laborer and advancing through determination and reliability to become Helena's most trusted site supervisor. "Morning, Helena," Tommy said, extending a steaming cup of coffee from the construction trailer's perpetual pot. "The concrete trucks are scheduled for the South Wing foundation pour at 9 o'clock, and the electrical subcontractor wants to review the conduit routing before we close up the walls in Section 3. Helena accepted the coffee gratefully, using the warmth to combat the early morning chill while reviewing the construction timeline that would guide the day's activities. The complex coordination required to manage multiple trades, material deliveries, and inspection schedules had become second nature after decades of practice. But she never allowed routine to replace careful attention to details that could make the difference between success and costly delays. "Tommy, make sure the electrical crew understands that any deviations from the approved plans need my personal sign-off," Helena instructed as she scanned the architectural drawings spread across a makeshift table constructed from sawhorses and plywood. The hospital's surgical suites require power redundancy that can't be compromised by field modifications, even if they seem more convenient. The morning progressed smoothly through the carefully orchestrated sequence of activities that transformed architectural concepts into physical reality. Helena moved between work areas, consulting with trade supervisors, inspecting material quality, and addressing the inevitable minor complications that arose when complex plans encountered real-world construction challenges. At 10:45 a.m., Helena was reviewing structural steel alignment with the crane operator when she felt the first signs of discomfort, a tightness in her chest that she initially attributed to the physical demands of climbing scaffolding and the stress of managing a complex project timeline. She had experienced similar sensations before, during particularly demanding construction phases, and had learned to manage work-related stress through careful scheduling and delegation. The discomfort intensified gradually, developing into a pressing sensation that made breathing slightly more difficult. Helena's practical nature led her to consider whether she might be developing a respiratory infection or experiencing muscle strain from the physical demands of construction site management. She had always prided herself on maintaining excellent health through active work and careful attention to safety protocols. By 11:15 a.m., the chest pressure had become impossible to ignore. Helena found herself needing to pause more frequently during conversations with workers, and the tightness was beginning to radiate into her left arm with an intensity that triggered memories of health education seminars about heart attack warning signs that she had attended for construction industry safety certification. Tommy noticed Helena's growing discomfort as she struggled to maintain her usual energetic pace while reviewing the concrete pour preparations. His 15 years of working closely with Helena had made him acutely aware of her typical behavior patterns, and her current appearance suggested something significantly more serious than routine construction stress. "Helena, you don't look right," Tommy said, with the direct concern of someone who had developed genuine affection and respect for his employer over years of shared challenges and successes. "Maybe you should sit down for a few minutes and let me handle the concrete inspection." Helena's initial impulse was to dismiss Tommy's concern and continue with her responsibilities, but the increasing intensity of her symptoms made it impossible to maintain the focused attention that construction safety required. The combination of chest pressure, arm pain, and growing shortness of breath was creating cognitive difficulties that could lead to dangerous mistakes in the high-risk environment of an active construction site. "Tommy, I think you might be right," Helena admitted reluctantly, allowing her trusted supervisor to guide her toward the construction trailer where she could rest while evaluating whether her symptoms required medical attention. "Let me sit down for a moment and see if this passes." The construction trailer provided temporary relief from the physical demands of site supervision, but Helena's symptoms continued intensifying rather than subsiding. The chest pressure was becoming more severe, and she was developing nausea and dizziness that suggested something far more serious than work-related stress or minor illness. Tommy remained beside Helena, monitoring her condition while coordinating site activities through radio communication with other supervisors. His growing concern was evident as Helena's complexion became pale and her breathing became increasingly labored, despite her attempts to maintain composure. "Helena, I'm calling 911. Tommy announced with the authority of someone who had witnessed enough construction site emergencies to recognize potentially life-threatening medical situations. "Whatever this is, it's beyond what we can handle here, and waiting could make things worse." Helena's construction industry experience had taught her to trust the judgment of experienced professionals, and Tommy's assessment carried the weight of 15 years of demonstrated reliability and sound decision-making. Her increasing physical distress was making it difficult to think clearly, and she recognized that her usual self-reliance needed to yield to practical necessity. The paramedics arrived at 11:47 a.m., their emergency vehicle navigating carefully through construction site obstacles, while Tommy directed them to the trailer where Helena was struggling with intensifying symptoms. The emergency medical technicians began immediate assessment procedures, checking vital signs and asking questions about Helena's medical history while preparing for potential cardiac emergency protocols. "Ma'am, we're going to take you to Riverside General Hospital for evaluation," the lead paramedic explained as his team prepared monitoring equipment and transportation arrangements. "Your symptoms suggest the possibility of cardiac involvement, and we need to get you to a facility where cardiologists can provide appropriate assessment and treatment." The ambulance ride to Riverside General became a blur of medical monitoring, radio communications with hospital emergency departments, and increasingly sophisticated life support interventions as Helena's condition continued deteriorating. The paramedics maintained professional calm while implementing protocols designed to stabilize cardiac patients during transportation to definitive medical care. Helena's last clear memory before losing consciousness was Tommy's concerned face, visible through the ambulance window, as the emergency vehicle departed the construction site, leaving behind the project that had occupied her thoughts and energy for months, but which suddenly seemed insignificant compared to the medical crisis that was overwhelming her body's fundamental systems. The emergency department at Riverside General Hospital mobilized with practiced efficiency as Helena's ambulance arrived. The cardiac care team had been alerted during transport, and Dr. Patricia Chen was waiting with equipment and personnel necessary to address severe cardiac emergencies that required immediate intervention to prevent permanent damage or death. Helena's arrival triggered a carefully choreographed sequence of medical assessments, diagnostic procedures, and life support interventions designed to identify the specific nature of her cardiac emergency while maintaining vital organ function during the critical initial treatment period. The emergency team worked with the focused intensity that characterized medical professionals dealing with time-sensitive situations where minutes could determine survival outcomes. Dr. Chen's initial evaluation confirmed the paramedics' assessment that Helena was experiencing a major cardiac event requiring immediate and aggressive intervention. The combination of symptoms, vital signs, and preliminary test results indicated a severe heart attack that was causing significant damage to cardiac muscle and threatening complete cardiovascular collapse. "We need to get her to the cardiac catheterization lab immediately, Doctor," Chen announced to the emergency team as monitoring equipment displayed the deteriorating cardiac rhythms that indicated Helena's heart was failing to maintain adequate circulation. "This is a massive anterior wall myocardial infarction, and we have a very narrow window for intervention." The cardiac catheterization procedure revealed extensive blockage in Helena's left anterior descending coronary artery, the vessel that supplied blood to the largest portion of her heart muscle. The obstruction was so complete that cardiac tissue was dying rapidly, creating the life-threatening emergency that had brought Helena to the edge of death within hours of her normal morning routine. Dr. Chen and her team worked desperately to restore blood flow through emergency angioplasty procedures, but Helena's condition continued deteriorating despite their sophisticated interventions. Her heart rhythm became increasingly irregular, and her blood pressure dropped to levels that indicated imminent cardiovascular collapse and clinical death. At 2:17 p.m., Helena's heart stopped beating entirely. The cardiac monitors displayed the flat line that indicated complete cessation of electrical activity, while her blood pressure fell to zero and her breathing ceased. Chen immediately initiated advanced cardiac life support protocols, beginning chest compressions and emergency medications designed to restart cardiac function. The resuscitation effort continued for 43 minutes, during which Dr. Chen's team administered multiple rounds of cardiac medications, performed electrical defibrillation, and maintained artificial circulation through continuous chest compressions. Despite their sophisticated medical interventions, Helena showed no signs of spontaneous cardiac activity or neurological response. At 3 p.m., Dr. Chen was forced to make the devastating announcement that Helena Whitmore had died from massive myocardial infarction, despite aggressive medical intervention. The death certificate was prepared, and Helena's body was prepared for transfer to the hospital morgue, while Dr. Chen contacted Diana to deliver the tragic news that would devastate Helena's only surviving family member. Diana received Dr. Chen's call while working at her desk in the Chicago Tribune newsroom, researching background information for an investigative series about municipal contract irregularities. The phone call transformed an ordinary afternoon into the worst moment of her life, as Dr. Chen explained that Helena had suffered a massive heart attack and had died despite emergency medical intervention. "Miss Whitmore, I'm very sorry to inform you that your mother suffered a severe cardiac event this morning and passed away at 3 p.m. despite our best efforts to save her," Dr. Chen said with the professional compassion that characterized experienced physicians delivering devastating news to family members. The heart attack was massive and sudden, and there was nothing anyone could have done differently. Diana's world collapsed with Dr. Chen's words. The mother who had been her anchor, inspiration, and closest friend was gone, leaving behind a void that seemed impossible to comprehend or accept. The shock was so complete that Diana struggled to process the practical information Dr. Chen was providing about arrangements, procedures, and decisions that needed to be made. Marcus was in his downtown office when Diana called with the devastating news, his afternoon calendar, filled with routine client consultations that suddenly seemed trivial compared to the family emergency that would require his immediate attention and support. Diana's voice was barely recognizable through her grief as she struggled to explain what had happened. "Marcus, Mom is dead," Diana said, through tears that made her words almost incomprehensible. "She had a heart attack at the construction site this morning, and the doctors couldn't save her. I need you to come get me because I can't drive right now." Marcus's response was immediately supportive and protective, canceling his remaining appointments and driving to the Tribune building, where Diana was struggling to maintain professional composure while dealing with personal devastation that exceeded anything she had ever experienced. His presence provided the stability Diana needed to begin addressing the overwhelming arrangements required by sudden death. The drive to Riverside General Hospital was conducted in shocked silence as Diana and Marcus both struggled to process the reality that Helena's vibrant presence had been eliminated so suddenly and completely. Diana's grief was compounded by guilt about not spending more time with her mother and regret about conversations they would never have. Dr. Chen met Diana and Marcus in the hospital's family consultation room, explaining the medical details of Helena's cardiac event while providing the compassionate support that helped family members understand what had happened to their loved one. The explanation provided some comfort to Diana by confirming that Helena's death had been quick and that she had not suffered prolonged pain. "Your mother's heart attack was what we call a widowmaker, a complete blockage of the left anterior descending artery that causes massive damage very quickly," Dr. Chen explained with gentle professionalism. "She would have lost consciousness rapidly, and despite our aggressive treatment, the damage was too extensive for survival." The medical details helped Diana understand that Helena's death had not resulted from neglect, delayed treatment, or medical errors, but rather from a catastrophic cardiac event that would have been fatal, regardless of circumstances. This knowledge provided some small comfort while Diana began confronting the overwhelming task of managing funeral arrangements and business responsibilities. Marcus assumed responsibility for coordinating with hospital administration, funeral home arrangements, and legal requirements, while Diana dealt with the emotional devastation that made practical decision-making nearly impossible. His efficient handling of logistical details allowed Diana to focus on grieving while ensuring that necessary arrangements were completed properly. The funeral home selected by Marcus was elegant and professional, providing services that honored Helena's achievements while accommodating Diana's emotional needs during the most difficult period of her life. Marcus's coordination with funeral directors, cemetery officials, and memorial service providers demonstrated thoughtful attention to details that Diana couldn't manage independently. During the 3 days between Helena's death and the scheduled funeral service, Marcus provided unwavering support for Diana while beginning to demonstrate increased interest in understanding Helena's business arrangements and estate planning details. His questions seemed motivated by genuine concern for Diana's welfare and desire to help manage responsibilities that had suddenly become overwhelming. However, Marcus was also quietly conducting research into Whitmore Construction's financial status, property holdings, and business relationships. His investigation was discreet and systematic, using his professional knowledge of estate planning to evaluate the scope and complexity of Helena's business empire, while positioning himself as Diana's primary advisor for managing inherited responsibilities. The funeral service itself was a beautiful tribute to Helena's life and achievements, attended by hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by her generosity, integrity, and professional excellence. Construction workers, business associates, community leaders, and personal friends gathered to honor a woman who had built something meaningful while maintaining the values that had guided her throughout 4 decades of success. Diana delivered a eulogy that captured Helena's essence as both a pioneering businesswoman and devoted mother, while Marcus provided quiet support that appeared to demonstrate genuine love and concern for his grieving wife. To outside observers, Marcus seemed to be exactly the supportive partner Diana needed during her time of devastating loss. During private moments when Diana was too overwhelmed by grief to pay attention to practical matters, Marcus was already beginning to implement plans that would fundamentally alter both Diana's future and Helena's legacy in ways that neither woman could have anticipated. What nobody at Helena Whitmore's funeral knew was that 57 minutes after Dr. Chen had pronounced her dead, Helena's heart had spontaneously resumed beating. The phenomenon, known as Lazarus syndrome, occurred while her body was being prepared for transfer to the morgue. A startled medical technician had noticed the faint pulse and immediately summoned Dr. Chen, who found herself facing a medical impossibility that challenged everything she understood about cardiac death. Helena's recovery was gradual and complicated. The massive heart attack had caused significant damage, and the 43 minutes without circulation had created neurological concerns that required careful monitoring. Chen made the unprecedented decision to move Helena to a private room in the hospital's research wing, where her remarkable recovery could be studied while maintaining complete confidentiality. Mrs. Whitmore, what you've experienced is extraordinarily rare, Dr. Chen explained during Helena's first coherent conversation 3 days after her supposed death. There are fewer than 40 documented cases of Lazarus syndrome in medical literature. Your spontaneous recovery after such an extended period of cardiac arrest is nothing short of miraculous. Helena's initial reaction was to demand immediate contact with Diana, but Dr. Chen convinced her to consider the implications of revealing her survival. The medical team needed time to understand her condition and ensure her recovery was stable, while Helena needed time to process what had happened and consider how to handle the complex situation her unexpected survival had created. Dr. Chen, my daughter believes I'm dead, Helena said with growing distress as the reality of her situation became clear. Diana is planning my funeral, dealing with my business, trying to manage everything while believing she's lost the only family she had left. I need to tell her immediately. Dr. Chen's response revealed the medical and legal complexities that Helena's unique situation had created. Mrs. Whitmore, your death certificate has been filed with the state. Your daughter is already making arrangements based on your official death. Revealing your survival now will create enormous complications, and we need to ensure your medical stability before addressing those issues. Helena's construction industry experience had taught her to think systematically about complex problems, and she began to understand that her unexpected survival had created an unprecedented opportunity to observe how people behaved when they believed she could no longer protect her interests. Diana's welfare. Dr. Chen, I want to see how my son-in-law handles my daughter's inheritance, Helena said, as her analytical mind began processing the strategic possibilities that her situation had created. I've had concerns about Marcus's motivations, and this might be the only chance I'll ever have to discover his true intentions. Meanwhile, Marcus was demonstrating exactly the kind of behavior that had originally triggered Helena's suspicions. Within hours of the funeral service, he had begun coordinating with financial advisors, real estate professionals, and business consultants who specialized in helping families liquidate inherited assets quickly and efficiently. Marcus's first major initiative was arranging a meeting with Patricia Vance from Heritage Financial Planning, an investment advisory firm that specialized in converting family businesses into managed portfolios. Marcus had researched Vance's practice carefully, identifying her as someone who would support his strategy of convincing Diana that business management was too complex and stressful for someone grieving her mother's sudden death. Diana, sweetheart, I've been thinking about the enormous pressure you're under trying to manage your mother's business while dealing with your grief, Marcus said as he introduced the concept of professional assistance during one of Diana's most vulnerable moments. Patricia Vance specializes in helping families transition from business ownership to investment management, which might give you time to heal without the stress of construction projects. Diana's response revealed how completely Marcus's caring presentation had disguised his predatory intentions. Marcus, I don't know anything about construction or business management. Mom always handled everything, and I'm terrified of making mistakes that would destroy what she spent her life building. Marcus's expression of understanding and support concealed his satisfaction at Diana's admission of incompetence and fear. Her emotional vulnerability was creating exactly the psychological conditions he needed to guide her toward decisions that would serve his interest rather than preserve Helena's legacy. Deanna, your mother built something incredible, but she also sacrificed her health and personal life to maintain such a demanding business. Marcus continued with carefully calculated concern. Maybe this is an opportunity to honor her memory by choosing a different path that prioritizes your well-being over business obligations. Patricia Vance's initial consultation with Deanna and Marcus was masterfully orchestrated to present liquidation as sophisticated estate planning, rather than surrender to predatory buyers. Vance had prepared detailed analyses showing how converting Whitmore Construction's assets into diversified investment portfolios would provide Deanna with steady income while eliminating the risks and responsibilities that had supposedly contributed to Helena's fatal stress. Deanna, your mother's construction business represents significant value, but it also exposes you to liability, market fluctuations, and management demands that require specialized expertise, Vance explained with the professional authority that Marcus had specifically sought. Converting these assets into managed investments would preserve your inheritance while protecting you from the complexities that might overwhelm someone without construction industry experience. Deanna's lack of business knowledge made her completely vulnerable to Vance's sophisticated presentation. The investment projections appeared impressive, the risk reduction arguments seemed logical, and the promise of simplified asset management appealed to someone overwhelmed by responsibilities she felt unprepared to handle. Patricia, this sounds like exactly what Deanna needs, Marcus said, with the supportive authority of someone who had positioned himself as Deanna's primary advisor and protector. We want to honor Helena's legacy while ensuring that Diana isn't destroyed by trying to manage responsibilities that exceed her experience and emotional capacity. During the days following Vance's presentation, Marcus systematically introduced Diana to additional professionals who all supported his liquidation strategy. Each advisor had been carefully selected for their willingness to prioritize rapid asset conversion over preservation of family business legacy, creating an echo chamber of professional opinion that reinforced Marcus's narrative about Diana's need for simplified asset management. Marcus arranged consultations with Martin Kowalski, a commercial real estate broker who specialized in acquiring properties from families who needed quick sales due to estate settlement pressures. Kowalski's approach was perfectly calibrated to exploit Diana's emotional vulnerability, while presenting below-market offers as generous opportunities to eliminate complex property management responsibilities. Diana, your mother's real estate portfolio is impressive, but commercial property management requires specialized knowledge about tenant relations, maintenance coordination, and market analysis. Kowalski explained during his carefully choreographed presentation, our firm can provide immediate liquidity by purchasing these properties at fair market value, eliminating your exposure to vacancy risks and maintenance costs. Kowalski's fair market value represented approximately 75% of the property's actual worth, but his presentation made the discount appear to be a premium for quick closing and elimination of Diana's management responsibilities. Marcus supported Kowalski's arguments while positioning himself as Diana's protective advisor, rather than someone who would benefit from her financial destruction. The systematic introduction of predatory advisors continued with Rebecca Morrison, a business liquidation specialist who presented asset conversion as honoring Helena's entrepreneurial legacy, rather than destroying the company she had spent decades building. Morrison's expertise involved dismantling family businesses in ways that maximized immediate cash while eliminating ongoing value creation. Deanna, your mother built tremendous goodwill in the construction industry, which creates immediate value for buyers who understand how to capitalize on established relationships, Morrison explained with the confidence of someone who had perfected her pitch through countless similar presentations. We can convert Whitmore Construction's client base, equipment, and reputation into liquid assets that provide immediate financial security without requiring your personal involvement. Morrison's liquidation strategy would have destroyed Whitmore Construction's integrated value by selling assets separately to different buyers, but her presentation made dismantling appear to be sophisticated business succession planning rather than systematic destruction of Helena's life's work. Marcus's coordination of these professional presentations revealed the sophisticated nature of his predatory strategy. Each advisor had been selected not for their expertise in preserving family business value, but for their willingness to support rapid liquidation that would benefit Marcus, while appearing to protect Diana from responsibilities beyond her capabilities. During private moments when Diana was too overwhelmed by grief to pay attention to business details, Marcus was already conducting his own research into Helena's assets, client relationships, and business operations. His financial consulting background provided him with the expertise necessary to evaluate acquisition opportunities while identifying potential buyers who would pay premium prices for immediate access to Whitmore Construction's established market position. Marcus had also begun researching Diana's psychological state to identify additional vulnerabilities that could be exploited during asset liquidation negotiations. He consulted with grief counselors who specialized in understanding how bereavement affected decision-making capacity, apparently seeking guidance for supporting Diana while actually learning techniques for maintaining her emotional dependence. Dr. Sarah Kim, Diana has been struggling with anxiety and decision-making difficulties since her mother's death, Marcus explained during his consultation with Diana's physician. I'm wondering whether medication might help her manage the stress of estate settlement while she processes her grief. Dr. Kim's prescription for anti-anxiety medication created additional opportunities for Marcus to influence Diana's judgment during critical financial negotiations. The pharmaceutical intervention that appeared to be compassionate medical care was actually creating cognitive impairment that would make Diana more susceptible to manipulation while reducing her ability to evaluate the professional advice Marcus was coordinating. Marcus's research into Diana's inheritance had also revealed information about Helena's succession planning that created additional opportunities for systematic asset conversion. Helena's will had been structured to provide Diana with maximum flexibility in managing inherited assets, but that same flexibility could be exploited by someone who understood how to guide her decisions toward liquidation rather than preservation. Thomas Brennan Sr., Helena's longtime attorney, had prepared estate documents that reflected Helena's confidence in Diana's eventual ability to manage family business responsibilities with appropriate support and education. However, Marcus's strategy involved convincing Diana that she lacked the capabilities necessary for business management, making professional guidance essential rather than supplementary. Marcus arranged a meeting with Thomas Brennan Jr., the senior attorney's son who had recently joined the practice with expertise in estate liquidation and asset simplification. The younger Brennan was more willing to support immediate conversion strategies that served executor convenience rather than long-term family wealth preservation. Diana, your mother's estate is quite complex, with business interests, real estate holdings, and contractual obligations that require specialized management, Thomas Jr. explained during his presentation of liquidation options. Converting these assets into liquid investments would simplify your inheritance while eliminating the legal complexities that could create personal liability. The legal advice that appeared to be protecting Diana from complex responsibilities was actually facilitating her systematic destruction by professionals who would profit from her inexperience while claiming to provide sophisticated estate planning services. Marcus had also begun coordinating with divorce attorney Catherine Phillips, whose expertise in high-asset dissolution would become relevant once Diana's inheritance had been converted into liquid wealth that could be easily divided during marriage termination. This planning was conducted in complete secrecy, presenting Marcus as Diana's devoted protector, while he actually prepared for her ultimate abandonment. Catherine, I'm concerned about protecting my wife's inheritance from potential creditor claims or business liability issues, Marcus had explained during his confidential consultation with the divorce specialist. What strategies exist for ensuring that inherited assets remain secure regardless of future circumstances? Phillips's advice focused on asset protection techniques that would coincidentally maximize Marcus's access to Diana's wealth during potential divorce proceedings. The legal strategies that appeared to be protecting Diana's inheritance were actually creating frameworks for Marcus to claim substantial portions of Helena's life's work through marriage dissolution. Marcus's systematic coordination of professional advisors revealed the sophisticated nature of his predatory campaign. Each specialist had been selected for their willingness to prioritize rapid asset conversion over family legacy preservation, creating an integrated strategy that would benefit Marcus while appearing to provide Diana with expert guidance during her most vulnerable period. The timeline Marcus had developed for completing asset liquidation was carefully calibrated to exploit Diana's grief while preventing her from seeking independent advice or developing emotional stability that might help her resist his manipulation. He needed to complete financial destruction before Diana recovered enough clarity to evaluate his guidance independently. Diana, I think we should move forward with Patricia's investment recommendations and Martin's property acquisition proposals, Marcus said during one of their evening conversations when Diana was most vulnerable to suggestion due to medication effects and emotional exhaustion. Your mother would want you to make decisions that prioritize your health and happiness over business obligations that might destroy you like they destroyed her. Diana's agreement to proceed with liquidation represented the successful culmination of Marcus's initial manipulation phase. He had convinced her that asset conversion was honoring Helena's memory while protecting Diana from responsibilities beyond her capabilities, when actually he was facilitating systematic destruction of everything Helena had built while positioning himself to claim substantial portions of the resulting wealth. However, Marcus had made one critical error in his sophisticated strategy. He had assumed that Helena's death was permanent and that his predatory behavior would never be discovered by someone who understood both his techniques and Diana's true capabilities. Helena Whitmore was very much alive, and she was observing every aspect of Marcus's systematic betrayal, while planning her own strategic response to protect both Diana and the legacy that represented 4 decades of dedicated work and sacrifice. 3 weeks after Helena's supposed death, Marcus had transformed their home into a command center for systematic asset liquidation. The dining room table was covered with appraisal documents, purchase agreements, and investment prospectuses that represented the dismantling of everything Helena had built. Diana moved through these materials with the mechanical compliance of someone whose judgment had been compromised by grief medication and emotional manipulation. Marcus had carefully orchestrated the timing of each liquidation step to maintain maximum pressure on Diana while preventing her from seeking independent advice. The anti-anxiety medication prescribed by Dr. Kim was affecting Diana's cognitive clarity, making her more dependent on Marcus's guidance while reducing her ability to evaluate the financial proposals being presented with increasing urgency. Diana, sweetheart, I know this is overwhelming, but Patricia needs your signature on the Heritage Financial Planning Agreements by Friday, Marcus said with the gentle authority of someone who had positioned himself as Diana's primary protector. The market conditions she's identified for liquidating your mother's assets won't last indefinitely, and delaying these decisions could cost you significant value. Diana's response revealed how completely Marcus had convinced her that rapid liquidation was sophisticated financial planning rather than predatory exploitation. Marcus, I trust your judgment completely. Mom's business is so complicated, and I'm grateful that you found advisors who can help me honor her legacy without destroying myself trying to manage responsibilities I don't understand. Marcus's satisfaction with Diana's compliance was carefully concealed beneath expressions of supportive concern, but Helena could observe his authentic reactions from her hidden position in the hospital research wing. Chen had agreed to extend Helena's confidential recovery period after understanding the family protection implications of her unique survival situation. Chen, Marcus is moving faster than I anticipated, Helena confided during one of their morning conversations. He's surrounding Diana with predatory advisors who are all coordinating to liquidate my assets at below-market prices, while convincing her that business management would be too stressful for someone in her emotional state. Dr. Chen's medical ethics training made her uncomfortable with Helena's deception, but she had witnessed enough family dynamics during medical crises to understand that grief often revealed people's authentic character in ways that ordinary circumstances never could. Helena's concerns about Marcus's predatory behavior were becoming more credible as evidence of his systematic manipulation accumulated. Mrs. Whitmore, how long do you intend to maintain this observation? Dr. Chen asked with the concern of someone who understood that prolonged deception could create psychological complications for both Helena and Diana. Your daughter is making irreversible financial decisions based on believing you're dead, and the longer this continues, the more difficult it will become to address the consequences. Helena's response reflected her understanding that Marcus's systematic destruction of Diana's inheritance would be permanent once liquidation agreements were finalized. Dr. Chen, I need to document enough evidence to protect Diana from Marcus's predatory behavior and ensure that he faces consequences for his systematic manipulation. Once those agreements are signed, there won't be anything left to recover. Meanwhile, Marcus was coordinating with increasingly aggressive buyers who understood that Diana's emotional vulnerability created opportunities for below-market acquisitions that would generate substantial profits for anyone capable of exploiting her inexperience and grief-impaired judgment. Jonathan Westbrook from Meridian Development Group had been circling Helena's downtown properties for years, waiting for an opportunity to acquire prime commercial real estate at discount prices. Marcus's coordination with Martin Kowalski had provided Westbrook with inside information about Diana's emotional state and financial desperation that enabled predatory acquisition strategies. Marcus, I understand that Diana is struggling with the complexity of her mother's real estate portfolio, Westbrook said during their confidential meeting at an upscale restaurant, where business predators often negotiated their most profitable deals. Meridian Development would be willing to purchase the entire downtown portfolio for $8 million, providing Diana with immediate liquidity while eliminating her property management responsibilities. Marcus knew that Helena's downtown properties were worth at least $12 million based on recent comparable sales, but Westbrook's offer represented the kind of exploitation opportunity that Marcus had been facilitating throughout his predatory campaign. The $4 million discount would benefit Westbrook while appearing to solve Diana's management problems. Jonathan, that sounds very reasonable given Diana's circumstances, Marcus replied with the authority of someone who had convinced Diana to trust his judgment completely. She's primarily concerned about eliminating stress and complexity, so immediate liquidity is more important than maximizing value through extended negotiations. Marcus's willingness to sacrifice Diana's financial interests for quick liquidation revealed his understanding that rapid asset conversion was essential for his ultimate strategy of claiming substantial portions of her inheritance through divorce proceedings that he planned to initiate once liquidation was complete. The coordination between Marcus and Westbrook extended beyond simple property acquisition to include strategic timing that would maximize Marcus's access to liquid assets while minimizing Diana's opportunity to understand what was happening to her inheritance. Westbrook agreed to structure the purchase as a quick closing that would eliminate Diana's chance for independent appraisal or negotiation. Marcus had also been coordinating with Cameron Mitchell, a business acquisition specialist, who represented investment groups seeking to purchase established construction companies at discount prices. Mitchell's strategy involved acquiring Whitmore Construction's client relationships, equipment, and market reputation while paying substantially less than the integrated business value. Marcus, our investor group is prepared to purchase Whitmore Construction's complete operations for $4 million, Mitchell explained during their private consultation. This would include all equipment, client contracts, employee relationships, and intellectual property, providing Diana with immediate capital, while eliminating her exposure to construction industry liability. Marcus understood that Whitmore Construction's integrated value exceeded $8 million based on its established client base, equipment assets, and market position, but Mitchell's offer represented another opportunity to convert Diana's inheritance into liquid assets that Marcus could claim during planned divorce proceedings. Cameron, Diana will appreciate an offer that eliminates her business management responsibilities while providing substantial immediate liquidity. Marcus responded with the confidence of someone who had convinced Diana that business liquidation was sophisticated estate planning, rather than systematic destruction of her mother's legacy. The coordination between Marcus, Mitchell, and other predatory buyers was creating an integrated strategy for dismantling Helena's business empire, while presenting systematic destruction as professional estate management that served Diana's best interests during her most vulnerable period. Marcus had also been working with Sandra Chen, a business liquidation consultant who specialized in converting family enterprises into cash through equipment auctions, contract transfers, and asset sales that eliminated ongoing operational value while maximizing immediate revenue for liquidation specialists. Marcus, we can organize a comprehensive liquidation of Whitmore Construction's assets within 30 days, Sandra explained during her presentation of dismantling strategies. Equipment auctions typically generate 60 to 70% of replacement value, while client contract transfers can provide additional revenue based on relationship strength and project pipeline. Sandra's liquidation approach would have destroyed Whitmore Construction's integrated business value by selling components separately to different buyers, but her presentation made systematic dismantling appear to be sophisticated asset optimization rather than predatory destruction of Diana's inheritance. Marcus's coordination with multiple liquidation specialists revealed his understanding that comprehensive asset conversion required professional expertise in exploitation techniques that could extract maximum value for predatory buyers while presenting systematic destruction as estate planning that served Diana's interests. The pharmaceutical component of Marcus's manipulation strategy was also intensifying. Dr. Kim had been gradually convinced to increase Diana's anti-anxiety medication dosage based on Marcus's reports about her continued emotional distress and decision-making difficulties during estate settlement. Dr. Kim, Diana has been having panic attacks when reviewing financial documents, and she's experiencing insomnia that's affecting her ability to make rational decisions about her inheritance, Marcus explained during his coordination with Diana's physician. I'm wondering whether adjusting her medication might help her manage the stress more effectively. Dr. Kim's increased medication prescription created additional cognitive impairment that made Diana more susceptible to Marcus's manipulation while reducing her capacity for independent analysis of the financial proposals being presented with increasing urgency and complexity. Marcus had researched pharmaceutical interventions that could affect judgment and decision-making capacity, consulting with specialists who understood how medications could be used to maintain psychological dependence while creating vulnerability during critical financial negotiations. The systematic pharmaceutical manipulation was supplemented by Marcus's coordination with grief counselors, who specialized in understanding how bereavement affected financial decision-making capacity. Marcus presented himself as seeking guidance for supporting Diana, while actually learning techniques for maintaining her emotional dependence and cognitive impairment. Dr. Elizabeth Morgan. Diana has been struggling with survivor guilt and feelings of incompetence about managing her mother's legacy, Marcus explained during his consultation with the forensic psychologist. I'm concerned that she might make irrational decisions based on emotional rather than practical considerations. Dr. Morgan's advice about managing Diana's grief was twisted by Marcus into techniques for maintaining her psychological vulnerability, while presenting himself as her essential protector against responsibilities that exceeded her emotional capacity and intellectual capabilities. Marcus's research into psychological manipulation techniques had also led him to coordinate with financial advisors who specialized in exploiting grief-impaired judgment for rapid asset conversion that benefited service providers rather than clients seeking long-term wealth preservation. Patricia Vance, from Heritage Financial Planning, had expanded her coordination with Marcus to include strategic timing that would maximize their ability to convert Diana's inheritance into managed assets, while minimizing her opportunity to seek independent advice or develop emotional stability that might help her resist their systematic manipulation. Marcus, we need to complete the liquidation agreements within the next 2 weeks, Vance explained during one of their private coordination meetings. Diana's grief won't last forever, and we need to finalize asset conversion before she recovers enough emotional stability to evaluate our recommendations independently. Vance's urgency revealed her understanding that Diana's vulnerability was temporary and that successful predatory exploitation required completing financial destruction before the victim developed decision-making capacity that could interfere with systematic asset conversion. The coordination between Marcus and his network of predatory advisors had created an integrated timeline for completing Diana's financial destruction within 6 weeks of Helena's supposed death. Each specialist understood their role in the systematic campaign while maintaining professional credibility through careful presentation of exploitation as estate planning. Marcus had also begun implementing the divorce preparation phase of his strategy, consulting with Catherine Phillips about optimal timing for marriage dissolution once Diana's inheritance had been converted into liquid assets that could be claimed during divorce proceedings. Catherine, I want to ensure that Diana's inheritance is protected from potential future complications, Marcus explained during his confidential consultation with the divorce specialist. What asset protection strategies would preserve her wealth regardless of changing circumstances? Phillips's advice focused on legal structures that would coincidentally maximize Marcus's access to Diana's converted assets during divorce proceedings, while appearing to provide protection against external threats to her financial security. The divorce planning was coordinated with Marcus's liquidation timeline to ensure that marriage dissolution would occur immediately after asset conversion was complete, providing Marcus with access to liquid wealth, while eliminating Diana's connection to the business and property assets that could have provided ongoing income and financial independence. Marcus's systematic coordination of professional predators revealed the sophisticated nature of his campaign against Diana's inheritance and emotional stability. Each advisor had been selected for their willingness to prioritize rapid exploitation over family legacy preservation, creating an integrated strategy that would benefit Marcus while appearing to provide Diana with expert guidance during her most vulnerable period. However, Marcus had made a critical assumption that was about to prove catastrophically wrong. He believed that Helena's death was permanent and that his predatory behavior would never be discovered by someone who understood both his techniques and Diana's actual capabilities. Helena Whitmore was very much alive, documenting every aspect of Marcus's systematic betrayal while coordinating with her own attorney to build evidence that would expose his predatory campaign and protect Diana from the comprehensive destruction that Marcus was orchestrating through professional coordination and psychological manipulation. Thomas Brennan Sr. had been quietly investigating Marcus's background and professional relationships, discovering patterns of predatory behavior that extended beyond Diana's current victimization to include previous marriages and financial relationships that had ended with systematic wealth extraction through similar manipulation techniques. Helena Marcus's first marriage ended with his wife liquidating her hedge fund to satisfy divorce settlement requirements, Thomas reported during one of their confidential meetings. The pattern suggests that targeting inheritance beneficiaries through marriage and divorce is Marcus's primary financial strategy rather than isolated opportunistic behavior. The discovery that Marcus was a serial predator who approached relationships as business acquisitions made Helena understand that Diana was facing someone whose entire lifestyle depended on systematically destroying families for financial gain, through sophisticated manipulation and professional coordination that had apparently been successful multiple times. 5 weeks after Helena's supposed death, Marcus had orchestrated what he believed would be the final phase of Diana's financial destruction. The memorial service he had planned was scheduled for the following Wednesday, but this gathering would serve a purpose far beyond honoring Helena's memory. Marcus had transformed the event into a sophisticated networking opportunity where Diana's grief would be exploited by every predatory buyer who had been circling Helena's assets for years. Diana sat in their home office, surrounded by liquidation agreements that would transfer her mother's life work to opportunistic buyers at prices that represented systematic theft, disguised as estate planning. The anti-anxiety medication that Dr. Kim had prescribed was affecting her cognitive clarity so severely that she struggled to understand the financial implications of documents she was being pressured to sign with increasing urgency. "Diana, sweetheart, I know this is overwhelming, but we need to finalize these agreements before the memorial service," Marcus said with the gentle authority that had become his primary tool for maintaining psychological control over his increasingly impaired wife. "Patricia and the other advisors have structured everything to provide maximum benefit while honoring your mother's legacy through simplified asset management." Marcus's coordination of the memorial service revealed the sophisticated nature of his predatory campaign. Rather than organizing a traditional celebration of Helena's life, he had created a business acquisition event where Diana's emotional vulnerability would be exploited by buyers who understood that grief-impaired judgment created opportunities for below-market purchases that could generate millions in profits. The guest list Marcus had compiled included every predatory business operator who had ever expressed interest in acquiring pieces of Helena's empire. Jonathan Westbrook from Meridian Development Group would be attending to finalize his below-market acquisition of Helena's downtown properties. Cameron Mitchell would present final offers for Whitmore Construction's complete liquidation. Rebecca Morrison would coordinate equipment auctions that would destroy the integrated business value that Helena had spent decades creating. "Diana, I've invited several of your mother's business associates to the memorial service," Marcus explained with the deceptive presentation that had characterized his entire manipulation campaign. "They want to share memories of Helena while discussing ways they might help you manage the business responsibilities that are causing you so much stress." Diana's medication-impaired judgment. prevented her from recognizing that Marcus had transformed her mother's memorial into a predatory feeding frenzy where her inheritance would be systematically dismantled by buyers who viewed her grief as a business opportunity rather than a human tragedy, deserving compassion and protection. Marcus had also coordinated with Patricia Vance to ensure that the memorial service would include presentations about investment portfolio conversion that would complete Diana's transformation from business owner to managed investment client. Vance had prepared materials showing how Helena's liquidated assets could generate steady income while eliminating the complexity that had supposedly contributed to Helena's fatal stress. Marcus, I've prepared portfolio projections that demonstrate how Diana's inheritance can provide financial security without the management demands that destroyed her mother's health, Vance explained during their final coordination meeting. The memorial service will provide an ideal opportunity to present these solutions while Diana is surrounded by supportive advisors who understand her situation. The coordination between Marcus and Vance revealed their shared understanding that Diana's emotional vulnerability was temporary and that successful exploitation required completing asset conversion before she developed decision-making capacity that could interfere with their systematic wealth extraction. Marcus had also been working with Dr. Kim to ensure that Diana's medication regimen would maintain optimal psychological compliance during the memorial service and subsequent liquidation meetings. The pharmaceutical manipulation that appeared to be compassionate medical care was actually creating cognitive impairment that would facilitate the largest wealth transfer of Marcus's predatory career. Dr. Kim, Diana will be under tremendous emotional pressure during her mother's memorial service, Marcus explained during his consultation with Diana's physician. I'm concerned that she might experience panic attacks or decision-making paralysis that could prevent her from completing the estate settlement process that's essential for her emotional healing. Dr. Kim's adjustment of Diana's medication created additional cognitive impairment that would make her more susceptible to manipulation during the memorial service, while reducing her ability to recognize that the business discussions Marcus had arranged were actually systematic exploitation, disguised as supportive professional advice. The pharmaceutical component of Marcus's strategy had been supplemented by his coordination with grief counselors, who specialized in understanding how bereavement affected financial decision-making capacity. Marcus had learned techniques for maintaining Diana's emotional dependence while presenting liquidation as therapeutic rather than predatory. Dr. Elizabeth Morgan, Diana has been experiencing survivor guilt about inheriting wealth that her mother created through such personal sacrifice, Marcus explained during his consultation with the forensic psychologist. I believe that converting her business inheritance into passive investments might help her process her grief without feeling overwhelmed by operational responsibilities. Dr. Morgan's advice about managing Diana's psychological recovery was twisted by Marcus into justification for asset liquidation that would benefit predatory advisors, while appearing to provide Diana with emotional protection from responsibilities that exceeded her current capacity. Marcus's research into psychological manipulation had also revealed techniques for using memorial services as opportunities to exploit grief-impaired judgment through social pressure and professional coordination that created the illusion of community support while actually facilitating systematic wealth extraction. The memorial service Marcus had organized would begin with traditional expressions of sympathy and remembrance, but would transition into business discussions where Diana's emotional vulnerability would be exploited by predatory advisors, who had been carefully positioned as Helena's trusted associates rather than opportunistic buyers seeking discount acquisitions. Marcus had scheduled private meetings immediately following the memorial service where Diana would be presented with final liquidation agreements, while her judgment remained impaired by grief, medication, and emotional exhaustion. The timing was calculated to maximize her compliance while minimizing her opportunity to seek independent advice or develop emotional stability that might help her resist systematic manipulation. Diana, I've arranged for brief meetings with your mother's key business associates after the memorial service, Marcus explained with the protective authority that had convinced Diana to trust his judgment completely. They want to discuss transition strategies that would honor Helena's legacy while protecting you from the stress that contributed to her death. The transition strategies Marcus had coordinated were actually systematic dismantling plans that would transfer Helena's assets to predatory buyers while presenting destruction as sophisticated business succession planning that served Diana's interests during her most vulnerable period. Meanwhile, Helena had been documenting every aspect of Marcus's predatory campaign from her secret position in the hospital research wing. Dr. Chen had agreed to extend Helena's confidential recovery period after understanding that revealing Helena's survival prematurely could interfere with evidence gathering that was essential for protecting Diana from comprehensive financial destruction. Dr. Chen, Marcus has scheduled Diana's complete financial destruction for next Wednesday, Helena reported during one of their morning conferences. He's using my memorial service as a business acquisition event where predatory buyers will exploit Diana's grief to acquire my assets at prices that represent systematic theft. Helena's construction industry experience had taught her to recognize sophisticated fraud when she encountered it, and Marcus's coordination of professional predators represented the most elaborate wealth extraction scheme she had ever witnessed. The systematic nature of his manipulation exceeded simple opportunistic greed and revealed someone whose entire lifestyle depended on destroying families for financial gain. Thomas Brennan Sr. had been working with Helena to document Marcus's predatory network while investigating his background and professional relationships. Their research had revealed patterns of exploitation that extended across multiple relationships and geographical areas, suggesting that targeting inheritance beneficiaries was Marcus's primary source of income rather than isolated criminal behavior.
Helena.
Marcus's coordination with divorce attorney Catherine Phillips indicates that he's planning to file for marriage dissolution immediately after Diana's asset liquidation is complete, Thomas reported during one of their confidential meetings. The timeline suggests that he's been planning divorce proceedings since before your supposed death. The discovery that Marcus had been planning to abandon Diana after claiming her inheritance made Helena understand that her daughter was facing comprehensive life destruction rather than simple financial exploitation. Marcus intended to claim Diana's wealth through divorce proceedings while leaving her emotionally devastated and financially dependent on whatever resources remained after systematic liquidation. Helena's investigation had also revealed that Marcus's predatory network included professionals who specialized in exploiting grief-impaired individuals through coordinated manipulation that maintained legal compliance while facilitating systematic wealth extraction. The sophistication of their techniques suggested extensive experience with similar exploitation campaigns. Marcus isn't working alone, Helena observed as she reviewed evidence of professional coordination that extended beyond simple business networking. He's part of an organized group that specializes in targeting inheritance beneficiaries through marriage, manipulation, and systematic asset conversion. The criminal network that Marcus represented had apparently been operating for years, with members who shared information about effective manipulation techniques while coordinating to identify vulnerable targets among recently bereaved families. Helena's wealth and Diana's trusting nature had made them ideal victims for systematic exploitation. Helena had also discovered that Marcus's first marriage had ended under circumstances that were virtually identical to his current campaign against Diana. His previous wife had been convinced to liquidate her hedge fund assets during supposed emotional support, only to discover that Marcus had been planning divorce proceedings while facilitating her business destruction. Marcus destroyed his first wife's financial independence using the same techniques he's applying to Diana, Helena said, as she reviewed court records from Marcus's previous divorce. The pattern suggests that his entire approach to relationships is based on systematic wealth extraction rather than genuine emotional connection. The evidence that Marcus was a serial predator who approached marriages as business acquisitions made Helena understand that Diana needed protection from someone whose professional expertise involved destroying families for financial gain through sophisticated psychological manipulation and legal coordination. Helena's research into Marcus's professional background had also revealed connections to financial advisors, real estate brokers, and business liquidation specialists who had participated in multiple similar exploitation campaigns. The network represented a sophisticated criminal enterprise that specialized in targeting vulnerable families through coordinated professional services that maintained legal compliance while facilitating systematic theft. We need to stop Marcus before Wednesday's memorial service, Helena said, as she prepared to abandon her secret observation and confront the systematic betrayal that threatened to destroy both Diana's inheritance and her emotional stability. Once those liquidation agreements are signed, there won't be anything left to recover. Thomas understood Helena's determination to protect Diana, but he also recognized that revealing Helena's survival would create legal complications that could interfere with criminal prosecution of Marcus's predatory network. The timing of Helena's revelation would be critical for maximizing protection while ensuring that Marcus faced consequences for his systematic manipulation. Helena, if you reveal yourself during the memorial service, Marcus could claim that your hidden survival represents evidence of mental incapacity or family conspiracy. Thomas warned as he considered the legal implications of Helena's continued deception. We need to coordinate your revelation with law enforcement to ensure that Marcus's predatory behavior is exposed without creating legal complications that could interfere with prosecution. Helena's response reflected her understanding that Diana's systematic destruction would be irreversible once liquidation agreements were finalized and divorce proceedings began. The choice was between legal complications that could eventually be resolved and comprehensive destruction that would be permanent. I'd rather fight legal battles than watch my daughter be destroyed by someone who targeted our family specifically because of the wealth I spent 40 years creating, Helena said with the determination that had built her business success through facing difficult challenges rather than avoiding them. As Helena prepared to reveal her survival and confront Marcus's betrayal, she understood that the quiet man who had married her daughter was actually one of the most dangerous predators she had ever encountered. His systematic coordination of professional manipulation, pharmaceutical intervention, and legal strategy represented a comprehensive assault on Diana's inheritance and emotional stability that would leave her devastated while Marcus walked away with millions of dollars. The memorial service that Marcus had organized as the culmination of his predatory campaign was about to become the venue for exposing systematic betrayal that had been hidden beneath performances of grief and devotion. Helena Whitmore was very much alive, and she possessed evidence that would shatter Marcus's carefully constructed deception while protecting the family he had targeted for systematic destruction. The storm that Marcus had been creating through his sophisticated manipulation was about to encounter a force that would expose every aspect of his predatory behavior, while ensuring that his systematic betrayal would have consequences rather than rewards. Some threats arrive disguised as protectors and helpers, but the strongest families are those who understand that genuine love builds rather than destroys the foundations that previous generations worked so hard to establish. The memorial service was in full swing when Helena Whitmore stepped through the front doors of Riverside Funeral Home. The gathering that Marcus had orchestrated as a business acquisition event was humming with predatory energy as buyers circulated among guests, presenting themselves as Helena's concerned associates while actually positioning themselves to exploit Diana's grief for maximum financial advantage. Helena paused in the lobby, observing the scene that Marcus had created in her supposed honor. Diana stood near the front of the main parlor, surrounded by the network of professional predators that Marcus had assembled. Her daughter's appearance was heartbreaking. Medication and emotional manipulation had left Diana pale, confused, and completely dependent on Marcus's guidance for even basic social interactions. Marcus himself was moving through the crowd with the confident satisfaction of someone whose elaborate scheme was reaching successful completion. He guided conversations between Diana and potential buyers, facilitating discussions about asset liquidation, while presenting systematic destruction as supportive assistance from Helena's trusted business associates. Helena checked her watch and calculated timing for maximum impact. The formal program was scheduled to begin in 15 minutes, at which point Marcus would transition from memorial tributes to business presentations that would complete Diana's financial destruction. Helena's intervention needed to occur before liquidation agreements were signed, and before Diana's decision-making capacity was compromised beyond recovery. Dr. Patricia Chen had positioned herself near the funeral home's side entrance, ready to provide medical testimony about Helena's remarkable survival and recovery. Thomas Brennan Sr. was coordinating with law enforcement officers who were prepared to address the criminal implications of Marcus's systematic fraud once Helena's survival was revealed to the assembled predators. Helena approached the main parlor, where guests were offering condolences to Diana, while Marcus orchestrated introductions to buyers who were eager to discuss immediate asset acquisition. The conversations were masterpieces of manipulation, presenting predatory offers as generous assistance while exploiting Diana's emotional vulnerability for maximum financial advantage. Diana, I want you to meet Jonathan Westbrook from Meridian Development, Marcus was saying as Helena entered the room unnoticed by guests who were focused on the grieving widow they believed represented their path to discounted real estate acquisition. Jonathan has been explaining how his company could help you transition away from commercial property management while providing excellent value for your mother's downtown holdings. Diana's response revealed how completely Marcus's pharmaceutical and psychological manipulation had destroyed her decision-making capacity. Mr. Westbrook, Marcus has explained that property management would be too stressful for someone in my emotional state. I'm grateful that you're willing to help me honor my mother's legacy while protecting my mental health. Helena felt rage building as she listened to Diana repeat Marcus's carefully constructed narrative about stress and incompetence. Her capable, intelligent daughter had been systematically destroyed by someone who had convinced her that liquidating her inheritance was sophisticated estate planning, rather than systematic theft disguised as emotional protection. Helena moved closer to the group surrounding Diana, positioning herself where she could observe Marcus's coordination with Patricia Vance, who was preparing to present investment portfolio projections that would complete Diana's transformation from business owner to managed investment client, whose assets would generate ongoing fees for predatory advisors. Diana, I've prepared some materials that demonstrate how your mother's liquidated assets can provide steady income without the management complexity that contributed to her death, Vance was explaining as she arranged documents on a nearby table. Converting your inheritance into professionally managed investments would honor Helena's memory while ensuring your financial security. The investment projections that Vance displayed were designed to appear impressive, while actually representing systematic wealth extraction that would benefit advisors rather than preserve Diana's financial independence. Helena could see immediately that the projected returns barely exceeded inflation while management fees would gradually erode Diana's principal over time. Marcus noticed Helena's presence before anyone else in the room recognized the impossibility of her attendance at her own memorial service. His expression transformed from confident satisfaction to absolute shock as he realized that his most fundamental assumption about Helena's permanent absence had been catastrophically incorrect. Helena, Marcus said with the disbelief of someone whose elaborate deception was collapsing in real time. How is this possible? Dr. Chen declared you dead. We held your funeral. Diana has been managing your estate settlement. Helena's response was directed toward the entire room but delivered with intensity that made Marcus understand exactly how much of his systematic manipulation she had witnessed and documented from her secret observation position. Marcus, I've been very much alive and watching how you've been helping Diana manage assets that belong to me, Helena said as she moved toward the table where liquidation agreements were spread like evidence of attempted theft. I've observed every predatory advisor you've introduced to my daughter, every below-market offer you've facilitated, and every step of your plan to liquidate her inheritance while claiming to protect her from responsibilities she supposedly can't handle. The room fell silent as guests realized they were witnessing something far more dramatic than a traditional memorial service. Diana stared at Helena with medication-clouded confusion, struggling to process whether her mother's presence represented hallucination, miracle, or deception that exceeded her current comprehension. Mom, Diana whispered, with the tentative hope of someone whose fundamental understanding of reality was being challenged by impossible circumstances. You're alive, but the doctors said you died. Marcus has been helping me manage your business because I thought you were gone forever. Helena's response revealed her comprehensive understanding of Marcus's systematic manipulation while providing Diana with information that would help her recognize the predatory nature of the guidance she had been receiving. Diana, I survived my heart attack through a rare medical phenomenon called Lazarus syndrome, Helena explained as she moved to embrace her confused daughter. Chen and I agreed to keep my recovery confidential so I could observe how people behaved when they believed I could no longer protect our family's interests. Marcus's attempt to maintain his deception revealed the desperation of someone whose sophisticated strategy was being destroyed by circumstances he couldn't control or manipulate. Helena, this is incredible news, but Diana and I have been making estate planning decisions based on professional advice from qualified advisors, Marcus said with forced calm that didn't conceal his panic about the legal and financial implications of Helena's survival. These liquidation agreements were structured to protect Diana from business responsibilities that were causing her tremendous stress. Helena's smile was cold, and knowing as she addressed Marcus's attempt to present systematic theft as estate planning designed to serve Diana's interests. Marcus, I have documentation of every predatory advisor you've coordinated with, recordings of your meetings with divorce attorney Catherine Phillips, and evidence of your pharmaceutical manipulation strategy designed to impair Diana's judgment during asset liquidation, Helena said as she pulled out folders containing comprehensive evidence of Marcus's betrayal. Your estate planning was actually systematic theft coordinated through manipulation of my grieving daughter. The revelation that Helena possessed detailed documentation of Marcus's predatory campaign made him realize that his elaborate deception had been observed and recorded by someone who understood exactly what he had been attempting to accomplish through his performance of devoted support. Jonathan Westbrook, whose real estate development company faced potential criminal liability for participating in inheritance fraud, immediately began distancing himself from the below-market acquisition agreements he had been negotiating. Mrs. Whitmore, if you're actually alive, then these property purchase agreements represent unauthorized transactions, Westbrook said, as he gathered documents with the urgency of someone trying to avoid criminal prosecution. Marcus represented himself as Diana's authorized advisor for legitimate estate settlement. Helena's response revealed how completely she had observed and understood Marcus's coordination with multiple predatory advisors who had all been positioned to profit from Diana's grief and inexperience. Mr. Westbrook, Marcus has been coordinating with you and multiple other buyers to liquidate my assets at below-market prices, while Diana's judgment was impaired by grief medication, Helena said as she displayed evidence of the systematic predation Marcus had orchestrated. Your estate planning was actually facilitating theft through manipulation of a vulnerable individual. Patricia Vance, whose investment advisory firm's reputation would be permanently damaged by association with inheritance fraud, began terminating her involvement with Marcus's liquidation strategy while trying to minimize her company's liability exposure. Mrs. Whitmore, Heritage Financial Planning will not be proceeding with any asset conversion agreements, Vance said as she collected documents while avoiding eye contact with the assembled guests who were witnessing the exposure of systematic professional misconduct. If Marcus misrepresented the circumstances of these transactions, we were unknowing participants in potentially fraudulent estate manipulation. Helena addressed Vance's attempt to claim ignorance about the predatory nature of the investment advice she had been providing to support Marcus's systematic destruction of Diana's inheritance. Miss Vance, you coordinated with Marcus for weeks to structure asset liquidation specifically designed to maximize his access to liquid wealth during planned divorce proceedings, Helena said as she displayed evidence of Vance's coordination with Marcus's divorce attorney. Your firm's fee projections were based on managing Diana's inheritance after Marcus had claimed substantial portions through dissolution settlement. Diana's medication-impaired cognition was beginning to clear as shock and adrenaline forced mental clarity despite the pharmaceutical interventions that Marcus had been using to maintain her psychological dependence on his guidance. Marcus, you were planning to divorce me? Diana asked with growing horror as she began to understand that the man she had trusted completely might have been systematically destroying her financial future while presenting himself as her devoted protector. Everything you told me about Mom's business being too complex, about needing to liquidate assets to protect my health, was all of that lies designed to steal my inheritance? Marcus's response revealed the sophisticated nature of his manipulation as he attempted to maintain psychological control over Diana, even while his deception was being exposed in real time by Helena's comprehensive evidence. Diana, you're confused because of the shock of seeing your mother alive, Marcus said with diminishing authority as he understood that his psychological control over Diana was collapsing along with his carefully constructed deception. Helena's survival is wonderful, but these accusations about my motivations are symptoms of the stress you've been experiencing during estate settlement. Helena interrupted Marcus's attempt to continue manipulating Diana by presenting evidence that would make his predatory behavior impossible to deny or reframe as protective concern. Diana, Marcus has been planning to divorce you immediately after completing asset liquidation, Helena said as she displayed correspondence between Marcus and his divorce attorney. He researched your inheritance potential before he married you, and he's been coordinating with predatory advisors to convert my assets into liquid wealth, he could claim during divorce proceedings. The revelation that Marcus had been planning divorce and asset seizure from the beginning of their marriage hit Diana like a physical blow, forcing her to confront the possibility that everything she had believed about her husband's love and devotion had been performance designed to facilitate her systematic destruction. Marcus, you never loved me, Diana said, with the devastation of someone whose fundamental understanding of her marriage was being destroyed by evidence of systematic deception. Everything about our relationship was calculated to give you access to my inheritance. Marcus's final attempt to maintain emotional manipulation revealed his desperation as he realized that Diana's psychological dependence on his guidance had been permanently destroyed by Helena's evidence of his predatory behavior. "Diana, of course I love you," Marcus said with forced emotion that could no longer conceal his authentic motivations. "Helena's accusations are designed to destroy our marriage and turn you against someone who has protected you from responsibilities that would have destroyed your mental health." Helena's response demonstrated how Marcus's supposed protection had actually been systematic destruction disguised as loving care. "Marcus, your protection included drugging Diana to impair her judgment, coordinating with predatory advisors to liquidate her inheritance at below-market prices, and planning to divorce her immediately after claiming her assets," Helena said with the calm authority of someone presenting indisputable evidence. "That's not love, that's systematic abuse designed to facilitate theft." Dr. Kim, who had unknowingly participated in Marcus's pharmaceutical manipulation strategy, arrived at the memorial service in response to Helena's request for medical testimony about the medication regimen that had been used to impair Diana's decision-making capacity. "Diana, I need to discuss your medication with you immediately, doctor," Kim said with the urgency of someone who had discovered that her medical treatment had been manipulated for non-therapeutic purposes. "Marcus requested specific drugs that can affect judgment and decision-making capacity, and I believe you may have been systematically over-medicated." The revelation that Marcus had been coordinating Diana's pharmaceutical treatment to facilitate financial manipulation made the assembled guests understand that they had witnessed systematic abuse rather than estate planning, and that their participation in Marcus's liquidation strategy had exposed them to potential criminal liability. Thomas Brennan Sr. entered the memorial service with law enforcement officers who were prepared to address the criminal implications of Marcus's systematic fraud and the coordinated professional misconduct that had facilitated Diana's near destruction. "Marcus Harrison, you're under arrest for inheritance fraud, elder abuse, systematic financial manipulation, and conspiracy to commit multiple felonies," Detective Maria Rodriguez announced as she approached Marcus with handcuffs and warrant documentation. "You have the right to remain silent, and anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Marcus's arrest in front of the predatory advisors he had been coordinating with sent shockwaves through the professional network that had been facilitating systematic exploitation of grieving families. Each advisor understood that their participation in Marcus's campaign had exposed them to criminal prosecution and professional sanctions. "Mrs. Whitmore, we've been investigating Marcus's predatory network for months," Detective Rodriguez explained as Marcus was led away in handcuffs. "Your survival and documentation of his systematic manipulation has provided the evidence we needed to prosecute not just Marcus, but the entire criminal organization that specializes in targeting inheritance beneficiaries." Helena's strategic decision to remain hidden while documenting Marcus's betrayal had resulted in comprehensive evidence that would protect not only Diana, but also future potential victims of the predatory network that had been operating across multiple states with sophisticated techniques for exploiting vulnerable families. Diana's recovery from Marcus's pharmaceutical and psychological manipulation began immediately as the shock of Helena's survival and the exposure of systematic betrayal forced mental clarity that had been suppressed by months of coordinated abuse disguised as loving care. "Mom, I'm so sorry I believed him," Diana said with tears of relief and shame as she embraced Helena while understanding how close she had come to losing everything that mattered. "Marcus convinced me that I was incompetent, that liquidating your business was the only way to honor your memory while protecting my mental health." Helena's response reflected her understanding that Diana had been the victim of sophisticated predatory behavior rather than someone who had made poor decisions through weakness or incompetence. "Diana, Marcus is a professional predator who studied your vulnerabilities and exploited them with techniques he's used successfully before," Helena said, with the compassion of someone who understood that manipulation victims shouldn't be blamed for the crimes committed against them. "None of this was your fault. You were targeted by someone whose entire lifestyle depends on destroying families for financial gain." The memorial service that Marcus had orchestrated as the culmination of his predatory campaign had become the venue for exposing systematic betrayal, while demonstrating that even the most sophisticated manipulation could be defeated by families who understood the importance of truth, protection, and genuine love, rather than the exploitation that characterized predatory relationships. Helena Whitmore was very much alive, and her strategic patience had resulted in comprehensive justice that would protect both her family and countless future potential victims from the systematic predation that had nearly destroyed everything she had spent 4 decades building through honest work and genuine care for the people who mattered most. 18 months after Marcus Harrison's dramatic arrest at Helena's memorial service, the ripple effects of his criminal enterprise continued to reshape how society protected vulnerable families from sophisticated predatory schemes. The courtroom was packed as Judge Patricia Williams prepared to deliver sentencing in what had become the largest inheritance fraud prosecution in state history. Marcus sat at the defendant's table, his once confident demeanor replaced by the hollow expression of someone whose elaborate criminal lifestyle had been completely dismantled by Helena's strategic patience and comprehensive evidence gathering. The man who had presented himself as Diana's devoted protector now faced decades in federal prison for crimes that revealed the true scope of his predatory network. Marcus Harrison, your systematic predatory behavior represents one of the most sophisticated inheritance fraud schemes this court has encountered. Judge Williams began with the gravity befitting someone addressing crimes that had devastated multiple families across several states. Your coordination of pharmaceutical manipulation, psychological conditioning, and financial exploitation demonstrates criminal sophistication that requires substantial incarceration to protect other potential victims. The evidence that Helena and Thomas Brennan Sr. had compiled during Marcus's predatory campaign filled dozens of binders and digital files that documented every aspect of his systematic manipulation. Phone recordings, email correspondence, financial transactions, and witness testimony had created an irrefutable case that exposed not just Marcus's individual crimes, but the entire criminal network that had been facilitating inheritance fraud for over a decade. The defendant's coordination with financial advisors, medical professionals, and legal specialists to systematically exploit vulnerable individuals represents organized criminal activity that extends far beyond opportunistic theft. Judge Williams continued as she reviewed the comprehensive evidence that had taken months to fully catalog and analyze. Mr. Harrison approached relationships as business acquisitions, using marriage and manufactured emotional dependency to gain access to family wealth that he systematically converted for personal benefit. Marcus's sentencing included 22 years in federal prison, followed by supervised probation that would prevent him from working in financial services or approaching recently bereaved individuals for any purpose. The restitution requirements exceeded $4 million, representing not just the immediate financial losses his victims had suffered, but the projected earnings that his systematic manipulation had destroyed. Patricia Vance, from Heritage Financial Planning, received a 12-year sentence for her coordination with Marcus's predatory network. Her firm had been permanently dissolved, and industry regulations had been restructured to prevent investment advisors from exploiting grief-impaired clients through coordinated manipulation that prioritized advisor fees over client welfare. Ms. Vance, your professional training included ethical obligations to protect vulnerable clients, yet you participated in systematic exploitation that violated every principle of fiduciary responsibility. Judge Williams said as she addressed the financial advisor whose sophisticated presentations had nearly convinced Diana to liquidate her entire inheritance. Your coordination with known predators to facilitate wealth extraction demonstrates criminal behavior that demands substantial consequences. Jonathan Westbrook from Meridian Development Group faced 8 years for conspiracy to commit fraud and systematic exploitation of inheritance beneficiaries. His real estate development company had been forced into bankruptcy after lawsuits from multiple families who had been targeted by the predatory network that Marcus had been coordinating. Dr. Sarah Kim had avoided criminal prosecution after cooperating with investigators to expose how medical professionals could be unknowingly manipulated into participating in pharmaceutical abuse schemes. Her testimony had led to new medical protocols for identifying when family members might be requesting medications for non-therapeutic purposes. The medical community has learned valuable lessons about protecting patients from family members who exploit healthcare relationships for systematic manipulation. Dr. Kim explained during a medical ethics conference where she presented Helena's case as an example of sophisticated abuse that required enhanced professional awareness. Marcus's coordination with Diana's medical treatment demonstrates how predators can use legitimate healthcare to facilitate criminal exploitation. The broader criminal investigation had identified 17 additional victims across 6 states who had been targeted by Marcus's network using similar systematic manipulation techniques. Each case involved recently bereaved individuals who had been approached by predators presenting themselves as supportive romantic partners while actually coordinating professional services to facilitate rapid wealth extraction. Diana had become a powerful advocate for inheritance fraud prevention, using her experience to help other victims understand that sophisticated manipulation required professional expertise to recognize and resist. Her recovery from Marcus's pharmaceutical and psychological abuse had been gradual but complete, demonstrating that even systematic conditioning could be overcome with appropriate support and education. Marcus convinced me that I was incompetent, that my mother's business was too complex for someone with my emotional vulnerabilities. Diana explained during her testimony at congressional hearings about inheritance fraud prevention. He used my grief as leverage to guide me toward financial decisions that would have destroyed everything my mother built while appearing to protect me from responsibilities I supposedly couldn't handle. Diana's testimony had contributed to federal legislation that strengthened penalties for financial crimes targeting grief-impaired individuals and established new reporting requirements for professionals who encountered potential inheritance fraud situations. The Diana Whitmore Protection Act included provisions for mandatory cooling-off periods before major financial decisions could be implemented by recently bereaved individuals. Helena had resumed active leadership of Whitmore Construction while working with Diana to develop business management skills that would ensure the company's continued success across multiple generations. Their relationship had been strengthened by Diana's understanding of Helena's sacrifice in remaining hidden to protect the family from systematic predation. "Mom, I understand now why you stayed hidden to observe what was really happening," Diana said during one of their regular business planning meetings. "Marcus almost destroyed everything you built. But more importantly, he almost destroyed my ability to continue building on your foundation." Helena's response reflected her satisfaction with Diana's recovery and growth following her liberation from Marcus's systematic manipulation. "Diana, the most valuable thing I built wasn't the company or the properties. The most valuable thing I built was you, and Marcus's failure to destroy that foundation proved that some legacies are stronger than any predator's ability to tear them down." The Whitmore Foundation for Family Protection had grown into a national organization that provided education, support, and advocacy for families affected by inheritance fraud. Helena had discovered that her business skills were perfectly suited for building an organization that could protect other families from the systematic predation that had nearly destroyed her own. Diana had taken primary responsibility for the Foundation's victim advocacy programs, using her personal experience to help other survivors understand that sophisticated manipulation represented criminal behavior rather than personal weakness or poor judgment. The Foundation's educational materials had been distributed to thousands of families while helping law enforcement agencies identify predatory patterns. "Diana, building the foundation has become more meaningful to me than expanding Whitmore Construction," Helena said during one of their regular planning meetings. "Protecting other families feels like the most important legacy we could create together." The foundation's success had led to speaking engagements where Helena and Diana shared their experience with professional groups, law enforcement agencies, and family organizations. Their presentations had helped thousands of people recognize and defend against sophisticated manipulation techniques while building stronger family protection strategies. Dr. Patricia Chen had expanded her medical research to include studying the intersection of grief counseling and financial crime prevention. Her work with Helena's case had opened new fields of research into how medical professionals could be trained to identify when patients might be victims of systematic manipulation designed to impair their decision-making capacity. Helena's survival and strategic documentation of Marcus's predatory behavior has revolutionized how we understand the relationship between healthcare and financial exploitation, Dr. Chen explained during a medical conference presentation. We've learned that predators increasingly use medical professionals as unwitting participants in systematic abuse schemes. The medical community had responded by developing new training programs for healthcare providers that help them recognize when family members might be manipulating treatment recommendations for non-therapeutic purposes. Dr. Chen's research had become the foundation for these educational initiatives. Thomas Brennan Sr. had worked with bar associations across multiple states to develop legal education programs that helped attorneys recognize and prevent inheritance fraud targeting vulnerable clients. The legal profession had implemented new ethical guidelines specifically designed to protect grief-impaired individuals from predatory legal advice. Helena's strategic documentation of Marcus's systematic approach has revolutionized how the legal profession approaches estate planning for vulnerable clients. Thomas had said during a continuing legal education seminar, "We've learned that traditional ethical guidelines weren't sufficient to protect clients from the sophisticated manipulation techniques that modern predators employ." The Whitmore Foundation had also established victim recovery programs that provided comprehensive support for families who had been targeted by inheritance fraud schemes. The programs included financial counseling, psychological support, legal assistance, and educational resources that helped survivors rebuild their lives while preventing future victimization. Helena, the victim support program has shown us how much long-term damage these predatory schemes cause beyond just the immediate financial losses. Foundation Director Jennifer Walsh had reported during their annual review meeting. Many victims struggle for years with self-doubt and damaged relationships, because they don't understand that they were targeted by sophisticated criminals. The Foundation's educational programs had been implemented in financial planning curricula, law enforcement training programs, and medical education coursework, ensuring that professionals who might encounter inheritance fraud would be equipped to identify and address systematic predatory behavior. 2 years after Marcus's conviction, Helena received a letter from Robert Harrison, Marcus's first husband, who had finally learned about the systematic predatory behavior through media coverage of the criminal trial. Harrison's letter had revealed the long-term damage that Marcus's manipulation had caused to previous victims who had never understood what had happened to them. Mrs. Whitmore, learning about Marcus's systematic approach has finally helped me understand how he destroyed my hedge fund and my confidence in my own judgment, Harrison had written. I spent years believing that I was incompetent and that liquidating my business was my own poor decision. Your courage in exposing his predatory behavior has given me the first peace I've experienced since our divorce. Helena had reached out to Harrison and other identified victims of Marcus's network, providing support and resources through the foundation while helping them understand that their victimization had resulted from sophisticated criminal behavior rather than personal weakness or poor judgment. The victim support work had become one of the Foundation's most important activities, helping people recover from the psychological damage that systematic manipulation had inflicted, while providing practical assistance for rebuilding their financial security and family relationships. 5 years after Marcus's conviction, Helena and Diana had transformed their traumatic experience into a comprehensive protection system that had helped hundreds of families avoid similar predation, while assisting dozens of victims in recovering from systematic manipulation and rebuilding their lives with renewed confidence and security. The Whitmore Construction Company had continued expanding under Diana's increasingly confident leadership, with new projects that honored Helena's legacy, while demonstrating Diana's own growing expertise in business development and family wealth preservation. The company had become a model for succession planning that protected family enterprises from both external predators and internal vulnerabilities. Mom, Marcus's attempt to destroy our family has ultimately made us stronger and given us the knowledge to protect other families from similar predation, Diana had said during their most recent planning session. The Foundation's success proves that love and determination can defeat even the most sophisticated predatory strategies, when families work together to build rather than tear down. Helena's reflection on the complete transformation of their devastating experience into meaningful protection for other families had confirmed her belief that even the most sophisticated predatory attacks could be defeated by families who understood the importance of truth, transparency, and mutual protection rather than the manipulation and exploitation that characterized predatory relationships. Memorial service that Marcus had intended as the culmination of his predatory triumph had instead become the beginning of systematic justice that protected countless families from sophisticated manipulation. Helena's strategic decision to remain hidden while documenting systematic betrayal had resulted in comprehensive consequences that dismantled an entire criminal network while establishing protections that would benefit families for generations. Diana had married again 3 years after Marcus's conviction, choosing a partner whose character had been thoroughly vetted through the Foundation's relationships with law enforcement agencies and victim advocacy organizations. Her new husband supported both her business responsibilities and her foundation work while understanding the importance of transparency and mutual respect in genuine relationships. Helena had also found companionship with Dr. Chen, whose shared experience with the complexities of Helena's survival and recovery had developed into deep mutual respect and eventual romantic attachment. Their relationship was built on shared values about integrity, protection, and building rather than exploiting the foundations that sustained meaningful lives. Patricia. Watching Diana rebuild her life and expand our family's protective mission has been the greatest achievement of my life, Helena said during one of their evening walks around the construction sites, where Helena continued to find satisfaction in creating permanent, meaningful structures. Marcus tried to destroy us, but instead he taught us how to recognize and defeat predation while building something even stronger. The legacy Helena and Diana had created together extended far beyond business success or financial achievement, encompassing a comprehensive mission that would protect families for generations, while honoring the truth that genuine relationships build strength rather than exploit vulnerability, create rather than destroy, and preserve rather than consume the foundations that families work so hard to establish. The criminal investigation that began with Marcus's arrest had expanded into a federal task force that identified similar predatory networks operating across the entire country. Helena's case had become the template for understanding how sophisticated inheritance fraud schemes exploited legal, medical, and financial systems while maintaining the appearance of legitimate professional services. Special Agent Catherine Reynolds, who led the federal task force on inheritance fraud, had spent 3 years tracking the connections between Marcus's network and similar criminal organizations operating in other regions. The investigation had revealed that inheritance predation had evolved into a sophisticated criminal industry that generated hundreds of millions of dollars annually through systematic exploitation of vulnerable families. Helena's strategic documentation provided the roadmap we needed to understand how these criminal networks operate. Agent Reynolds explained during a federal law enforcement conference. Marcus's case demonstrated that inheritance fraud has become as organized and sophisticated as any other form of criminal enterprise, with specialized roles, shared resources, and coordinated training programs for new predators. The federal investigation had identified training seminars where predatory techniques were taught to individuals seeking to exploit inheritance beneficiaries through marriage, friendship, or professional relationships. These seminars included instruction in psychological manipulation, pharmaceutical research, legal system exploitation, and professional coordination that enabled systematic wealth extraction while maintaining legal compliance. Helena had testified before congressional committees about the need for comprehensive federal legislation that would address the increasingly sophisticated nature of inheritance fraud while providing resources for victim recovery and family protection. Her testimony had been instrumental in securing funding for enhanced law enforcement training and victim support programs. Senators, the criminal network that targeted my family represents a fundamental threat to American families who have worked generations to build financial security, Helena had said during her congressional testimony. These predators use our own legal, medical, and financial systems as weapons against vulnerable individuals, and we need federal coordination to protect families from systematic exploitation. The congressional hearings had also revealed that inheritance fraud was being facilitated by technological advances that enabled predators to research potential victims, coordinate professional services, and manipulate family dynamics with unprecedented precision. Social media platforms had become hunting grounds, where predators identified recently bereaved individuals and began grooming processes that could extend over months or years. Diana's expertise in investigative journalism had proven invaluable in exposing the technological aspects of inheritance fraud. Her research had revealed how predators used data mining, social media monitoring, and financial research tools to identify and target families whose recent losses made them vulnerable to systematic manipulation. These criminals aren't opportunistic individuals taking advantage of chance encounters, Diana explained during her presentation to the Federal Trade Commission. They're sophisticated operators who use technology to identify victims, research family dynamics, and coordinate professional services that facilitate systematic wealth extraction through carefully planned campaigns. The Whitmore Foundation had developed educational programs specifically designed to help families understand how digital footprints could expose them to predatory targeting. These programs included guidance on social media privacy, estate planning confidentiality, and communication security that could prevent predators from accessing information necessary for systematic manipulation. Helena had also worked with cybersecurity experts to develop digital protection strategies that could prevent predators from researching family finances, business operations, and personal relationships through online sources. The Foundation's digital security programs had become essential resources for families seeking to protect themselves from technologically sophisticated predatory schemes. The Foundation's research had revealed that inheritance fraud was increasingly targeting military families, whose deployment schedules and geographic mobility created additional vulnerabilities that predators could exploit. Helena had developed specialized programs for military families that addressed the unique challenges of maintaining family security across multiple states and international assignments. Military families face particular risks because of their mobility and the emotional stress associated with deployment separations. Foundation researcher Dr. Michael Torres explained during a Department of Defense briefing. Predators specifically target military spouses and children because of their periodic isolation and the complexity of managing financial affairs across multiple jurisdictions. The military protection programs that Helena had developed included coordination with base financial counselors, legal assistance offices, and chaplain services to create comprehensive support networks that could identify and address predatory behavior before systematic exploitation could begin. Helena's work with law enforcement agencies had also revealed that inheritance fraud was being coordinated internationally, with criminal networks that moved across national borders to avoid prosecution while accessing victims in multiple countries. The Foundation had begun working with Interpol and international law enforcement agencies to develop cross-border cooperation protocols. International coordination is essential because these criminal networks don't respect national boundaries, explained Detective Inspector Sarah Morrison from Scotland Yard, who had worked with Helena to identify predatory schemes targeting British families. Helena's case provided crucial insights into how these networks operate globally while appearing to be local professionals providing legitimate services. The international cooperation that Helena had facilitated had led to the identification and prosecution of predatory networks in Canada, the United Kingdom, Australia, and several European countries. Each investigation had revealed similar patterns of professional coordination, psychological manipulation, and legal system exploitation that demonstrated the global scope of inheritance fraud as a criminal industry. Diana had established the Foundation's International Victim Support Division, which provided resources and assistance for families who had been targeted by cross-border predatory schemes. This division worked closely with embassy services, international law enforcement agencies, and victim advocacy organizations to ensure that predatory crime didn't escape consequences simply by crossing national boundaries. The Foundation's educational programs had been translated into multiple languages and adapted for different legal systems, ensuring that families worldwide could access protection strategies that addressed local variations in estate law, medical practice, and financial regulation while maintaining core principles of predatory behavior recognition and family protection. Helena's collaboration with academic researchers had also led to the development of predictive models that could identify potential predatory targeting before systematic manipulation began. These models analyzed patterns in grief counseling services, estate planning consultations, and financial advisory relationships to detect coordinated professional activity that might indicate predatory behavior. Helena's case provided the data foundation for understanding how predatory networks coordinate their activities, explained Dr. Jennifer Walsh from the University of Chicago's Financial Crime Research Institute. We can now identify statistical patterns that suggest systematic manipulation is occurring, enabling earlier intervention and family protection. The predictive modeling research had been implemented by financial institutions, legal service providers, and healthcare organizations to create early warning systems that could alert authorities when professional coordination suggested potential inheritance fraud. These systems had prevented dozens of predatory schemes from reaching completion while providing families with protection before systematic manipulation could begin. Helena had also established partnership programs with major corporations whose employees might be targeted by inheritance predators seeking to exploit workplace grief counseling services and employee assistance programs. These partnerships provided corporate security teams with training and resources for identifying when employee support services might be manipulated for predatory purposes. Corporate America has a responsibility to protect employees from predators who exploit workplace relationships to gain access to vulnerable individuals, Helena explained during a National Association of Manufacturers conference. Employee assistance programs and grief counseling services can become entry points for sophisticated manipulation if corporations don't understand how predatory networks operate. The corporate protection programs that Helena had developed included background screening protocols for employee assistance providers, training for human resources professionals, and communication strategies that could help employees recognize when supportive relationships might actually be predatory targeting disguised as professional assistance. Diana's journalistic experience had also led to the creation of media literacy programs that helped families understand how predators used news coverage, obituaries, and public records to identify potential victims and research family dynamics that could be exploited during systematic manipulation campaigns. Predators read obituaries like business opportunities, Diana explained during a journalism ethics conference. They use publicly available information to identify recently bereaved families, research their financial circumstances, and develop manipulation strategies that exploit specific vulnerabilities revealed through media coverage. The media literacy programs that Diana had developed included guidance for families about managing public information during bereavement, working with journalists to balance transparency with privacy protection, and understanding how digital information could be used by predators to facilitate systematic targeting and manipulation. The Foundation's victim recovery programs had also expanded to include financial reconstruction services that helped families rebuild wealth that had been stolen through predatory schemes. These services included asset recovery litigation, insurance claim assistance, and financial planning that could restore families' economic security while preventing future victimization. Recovery from inheritance fraud requires more than just stopping the immediate predatory behavior, explained Foundation financial counselor Maria Rodriguez. Families need comprehensive assistance to rebuild their financial security, restore their confidence in professional relationships, and develop protection strategies that prevent future victimization. The financial reconstruction services had helped dozens of families recover millions of dollars in assets that had been stolen through predatory schemes while building stronger financial management practices that included enhanced security protocols and family decision-making processes that prevented individual family members from being manipulated without other family members' knowledge. Helena's work had also led to the creation of professional certification programs for estate planners, financial advisors, and legal service providers who specialized in serving recently bereaved families. These certification programs included training in predatory behavior recognition, victim protection protocols, and ethical practices that prioritized family welfare over professional profit. Professional certification ensures that families can identify service providers who understand their vulnerability and are committed to genuine protection rather than exploitation, explained Thomas Brennan Sr., who had helped develop the certification standards. Helena's experience demonstrated that families need ways to distinguish between legitimate professionals and predators who present themselves as qualified advisors. The certification programs had been adopted by state licensing boards, professional associations, and continuing education providers, ensuring that professionals who worked with vulnerable families possessed the knowledge and ethical commitment necessary to provide genuine protection rather than facilitate systematic exploitation. 10 years after Marcus's conviction, Helena and Diana had transformed their traumatic experience into a comprehensive protection system that had fundamentally changed how society understood and addressed inheritance fraud. Their foundation had become the leading authority on family protection from predatory schemes, with programs that had helped thousands of families avoid victimization while assisting hundreds of survivors in rebuilding their lives. The Whitmore Construction Company had also evolved into a model for family business succession that incorporated comprehensive security protocols designed to protect family enterprises from both external predators and internal vulnerabilities. Diana's leadership had expanded the company into new markets while building stronger employee relations and community partnerships that honored Helena's legacy of integrity and genuine care. "Mom, what we've built together extends far beyond business success," Diana said during the Foundation's 10th anniversary celebration. "We've created a legacy of protection that will benefit families for generations while proving that love and determination can defeat even the most sophisticated predatory schemes." Helena's response reflected her pride in Diana's growth and their shared mission of family protection. "Diana, watching you transform our terrible experience into a force that protects countless families has been the greatest achievement of my life. Marcus tried to destroy us, but instead he taught us how to recognize and defeat predation while building something even stronger." The anniversary celebration had brought together hundreds of families who had been protected by the Foundation's programs, law enforcement officers who had used the Foundation's research to prosecute predatory schemes, and professionals who had implemented the Foundation's training programs to better serve vulnerable clients. The event had also featured presentations about emerging threats to family security, including new technologies that predators were using to target vulnerable individuals, and evolving manipulation techniques that required enhanced protection strategies. Helena and Diana's work continued to evolve as predatory behavior became more sophisticated and required increasingly comprehensive countermeasures. "The fight against inheritance fraud requires constant vigilance and adaptation," Helena explained during her keynote address. "Predators will always develop new techniques for exploiting vulnerable families, which means our protection strategies must continue evolving to address emerging threats while maintaining the core principles of family security and mutual protection." The Foundation's research division had also begun investigating artificial intelligence and deepfake technologies that predators were using to enhance their manipulation capabilities. Dr. Rachel Kim, the Foundation's technology research director, had discovered that criminal networks were using AI-generated communications to impersonate deceased family members, creating psychological manipulation tools that exceeded anything previously imagined. "We're seeing predators use deepfake audio and video technology to create communications that appear to come from deceased family members," Dr. Kim explained during a cybersecurity conference. "These synthetic communications are used to validate predatory advice by making victims believe their dead loved ones are endorsing financial decisions that actually serve predatory interests." The AI-enhanced manipulation techniques represented a quantum leap in predatory sophistication that required entirely new protection strategies. Helena had worked with cybersecurity experts and forensic technologists to develop detection methods that could identify synthetic communications while helping families understand how artificial intelligence could be weaponized against vulnerable individuals. Diana's investigative journalism background had proven crucial in exposing how predatory networks were using social media algorithms and data analytics to identify potential victims with unprecedented precision. Her research had revealed that predators were purchasing consumer data, medical information, and financial profiles from data brokers to create comprehensive victim profiles before initiating contact. "Modern predators don't rely on chance encounters or public obituaries," Diana explained during a Federal Communications Commission hearing. "They're using big data analytics to identify recently bereaved individuals, analyze their financial circumstances, and develop personalized manipulation strategies before making first contact. The data-driven targeting that Diana had uncovered had led to new privacy legislation that restricted how personal information could be sold and used, particularly data related to recent deaths, estate proceedings, and family financial circumstances. The foundation had worked with privacy advocates and consumer protection agencies to ensure that personal grief couldn't be monetized by data brokers serving predatory interests. Helena's collaboration with international banking authorities had also revealed how predatory networks were using cryptocurrency and offshore financial services to hide stolen assets while complicating recovery efforts for victim families. The foundation had developed expertise in international asset recovery that could trace and recover wealth that predators attempted to hide through complex financial structures. Cryptocurrency has become the preferred method for predators to hide stolen inheritance assets, explained Foundation financial investigator David Chen. These digital currencies can be transferred across international borders instantly, making asset recovery extremely challenging unless families understand how these systems operate. The cryptocurrency education programs that Helena had developed included partnerships with blockchain analysis companies, international law enforcement agencies, and financial recovery specialists who could track digital assets even when predators attempted to hide them through multiple transactions and wallet transfers. The foundation had also established scholarship programs for students studying financial crime prevention, cybersecurity, and victim advocacy. These scholarships ensured that future professionals would possess the knowledge and skills necessary to combat increasingly sophisticated predatory schemes, while maintaining the ethical commitment to family protection that Helena's experience had demonstrated was essential. Education is our most powerful weapon against predatory evolution, Helena explained during a university commencement address. Each generation of protection professionals must be better prepared than the last to recognize and defeat increasingly sophisticated schemes that threaten family security and intergenerational wealth preservation. The scholarship recipients had gone on to careers in federal law enforcement, cybersecurity, victim advocacy, and financial crime prevention, creating a network of professionals who understood predatory behavior and were committed to family protection, rather than facilitating systematic exploitation for personal or professional gain. Diana's work had also expanded into documentary filmmaking, creating educational content that helped families understand predatory behavior through real case studies and expert analysis. Her documentaries had been distributed through educational institutions, community organizations, and streaming platforms, reaching millions of families with critical protection information. Visual storytelling can communicate complex predatory patterns in ways that academic research and legal documentation cannot. Diana explained during a film festival presentation, families need to see how manipulation unfolds in real time to understand how sophisticated predators exploit emotional vulnerabilities. The documentary series that Diana had produced included interviews with predatory crime survivors, law enforcement experts, financial crime analysts, and psychological manipulation specialists who could explain how systematic exploitation functioned while providing practical guidance for recognition and resistance. Helena's speaking engagements had evolved into masterclasses for estate planning attorneys, financial advisors, and family counselors who worked with recently bereaved clients. These intensive training programs included case study analysis, predatory behavior recognition, and intervention strategies that could protect vulnerable families while maintaining professional ethical standards. Professional education must include predatory behavior recognition as a core competency, Helena explained during a continuing education seminar for estate planning attorneys. Lawyers and financial advisors who work with vulnerable families have ethical obligations to protect clients from manipulation, but this requires training that most professional programs don't provide. The professional training programs that Helena had developed had been adopted by state bar associations, certified financial planner organizations, and continuing education providers across multiple disciplines, ensuring that professionals who encountered vulnerable families possessed the knowledge necessary to provide genuine protection rather than unwittingly facilitate systematic exploitation. The Foundation's victim advocacy programs had also expanded to include legislative testimony and policy development that addressed systemic vulnerabilities in legal, financial, and healthcare systems that predators exploited. Helena and Diana had become recognized experts whose recommendations influence state and federal policy decisions affecting family protection. Systemic reform requires understanding how predators exploit institutional weaknesses. Diana explained during a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing, "Our experience revealed gaps in professional oversight, legal procedures, and consumer protection that enabled systematic exploitation while maintaining the appearance of legitimate service provision." The policy recommendations that Helena and Diana had developed included enhanced background screening for professionals serving vulnerable populations, mandatory reporting requirements for suspected exploitation, and legal protections for family members who intervened to prevent predatory manipulation of recently bereaved relatives. Helena's work had also led to the creation of rapid response teams that could provide immediate assistance when families suspected they were being targeted by predatory schemes. These teams included financial crime investigators, victim advocates, legal specialists, and psychological support professionals who could intervene before systematic manipulation could progress to irreversible asset liquidation. Time is critical when families recognize predatory targeting, explained Rapid Response Team Coordinator Lieutenant Maria Santos. The sooner families receive professional assistance, the better their chances of preventing financial destruction while preserving family relationships that predators often try to damage during their manipulation campaigns. The rapid response teams had prevented hundreds of predatory schemes from reaching completion while providing families with comprehensive protection services that addressed immediate threats while building long-term security against future targeting attempts. The Foundation's research had also revealed that predatory networks were increasingly targeting families affected by Alzheimer's disease, dementia, and other cognitive impairments that created additional vulnerabilities beyond traditional grief-based manipulation. Helena had developed specialized protection programs for families dealing with age-related cognitive decline. Cognitive impairment creates predatory opportunities that require different protection strategies than traditional inheritance fraud, explained Foundation Geriatric Specialist Dr. Sarah Martinez. Families need comprehensive planning that addresses progressive cognitive decline while preventing predators from exploiting confusion and decision-making difficulties. The cognitive protection programs included legal frameworks for family decision-making, financial management systems that prevented unauthorized access, and medical coordination that could identify when cognitive symptoms might be artificially enhanced through pharmaceutical manipulation, similar to what Marcus had used against Diana. Helena's collaboration with retirement communities and assisted living facilities had also created institutional protection protocols that could identify when residents were being targeted by predatory individuals who approached through seemingly legitimate social or romantic relationships. These protocols had prevented numerous exploitation attempts while preserving residents' autonomy and social connections. The institutional protection programs included staff training, family communication systems, and financial monitoring that could detect suspicious activity without creating overly restrictive environments that diminished quality of life for elderly residents, who deserved both protection and independence. 15 years after Marcus's conviction, Helena reflected on the transformation that her near-death experience had created. What had begun as a personal nightmare had evolved into a comprehensive protection system that had fundamentally changed how society understood and addressed predatory behavior targeting vulnerable families. "Marcus believed that my death would give him unlimited access to our family's wealth," Helena said during a private interview for Diana's latest documentary. "Instead, my survival created the opportunity to expose his predatory network while building protections that have helped thousands of families avoid similar destruction." Diana's own reflection on their journey emphasized how their shared trauma had ultimately strengthened their relationship while creating meaningful purpose that extended far beyond personal recovery. Mom's strategic patience during the most difficult period of our lives created the evidence we needed to achieve justice while building something that will protect families for generations. The annual Whitmore Foundation Gala had become one of the most significant fundraising events for family protection and victim advocacy, bringing together survivors, law enforcement professionals, researchers, and policymakers who shared commitment to preventing predatory exploitation while supporting recovery for families who had been targeted. The most recent gala had raised over $2 million for foundation programs, while announcing new initiatives that would address emerging threats from artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency manipulation, and international predatory networks that were adapting their techniques to exploit technological advances and regulatory gaps. Helena's vision for the Foundation's future included expansion into developing countries where inheritance fraud was becoming increasingly sophisticated, but where protection resources remained limited. The international expansion would require partnerships with local law enforcement agencies, legal systems, and community organizations that understood cultural variations in family structures and financial practices. Family protection is a universal human need that transcends cultural boundaries, Helena explained during her foundation address. Predatory behavior adapts to local circumstances, but the fundamental principles of recognition, resistance, and recovery apply regardless of geographic location or cultural context. The international expansion plans included translation of educational materials, adaptation of protection strategies to different legal systems, and training programs for local professionals who could provide ongoing support for families in regions where the Foundation's direct presence would be limited. Diana's journalism career had also evolved to include investigative reporting on international predatory networks, corporate exploitation of vulnerable populations, and governmental failures to protect citizens from systematic financial manipulation. Her Pulitzer Prize nomination had recognized her comprehensive exposure of inheritance fraud as a significant threat to family security and intergenerational wealth preservation. Investigative journalism and victim advocacy complement each other perfectly, Diana explained during a journalism conference. My personal experience with predatory targeting has enhanced my ability to recognize and expose systematic exploitation while maintaining the professional objectivity necessary for credible reporting. The awards and recognition that Helena and Diana had received for their family protection work had increased public awareness of inheritance fraud, while providing platforms for educating families about predatory behavior recognition and resistance strategies that could prevent systematic exploitation before it could begin. As Helena approached her 80th birthday, she continued managing Whitmore Construction while expanding the Foundation's mission to address new threats that emerged as predatory networks adapted to changing technology, demographics, and social structures that created fresh opportunities for exploiting vulnerable families. The fight against predatory behavior will never end. Helena reflected during a quiet evening with Diana and Dr. Chen, but every family we protect, every predator we expose, and every professional we train contributes to a legacy of protection that makes all families safer. The storm that Marcus had attempted to create through his sophisticated manipulation had been completely defeated by a mother's love and determination to protect her family from systematic predation. Helena Whitmore had not only survived her supposed death but had used her unexpected second chance to ensure that her family's legacy would include protection for countless others who might face similar threats disguised as love and support. Some predators arrive with elaborate deceptions and professional coordination, but the strongest families are those who understand that genuine love builds rather than tears down, protects rather than exploits, and strengthens rather than weakens the foundations that previous generations worked so hard to establish through honest effort and authentic care for the people who matter most. Looking for more? We've got two amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.